All right, what is going on? Drive time Tuesday afternoon. It is about 11 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is cold. It is rainy. Winter is on its way as we are preparing to turn our calendars to November. Happy Tuesday to you, as it is every single day. It's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That young man is Porter Larson producing the show today. And as we do every day, we're going to do a little bit of everything. We're going to do some Utah football, some college football, some BYU. We'll do a little NFL as the weekend in pro football came to a close last night. Monday Night Football, where the Steelers were able to get it done. Moved to 6-2 now, and Russell Wilson is 2-0 as a starter. So we'll do a little pro football on the show today. The Utah Jazz are back in action. Sacramento is in town to take on the Jazz. And just so gutted for Taylor Hendricks. So we're going to talk about that, talk about the injury, what it means for the Jazz, what it means for Taylor as far as his continued development. It almost felt like Will Hardy was almost in tears last night during his post-game presser. So a tough piece of news for this young Jazz team. They've lost all 3 of the games they've played so far. If you listen to our Jazz coverage, our NBA coverage, you know that I'm fine with that. This is not a group that is built to win anything special right now. There's not a quick fix available on the market to catapult them to where we all hope that they can be at some point, and that's getting back to a legitimate contender in the Western Conference at some point. So get to some Jazz stuff, some NBA stuff on the program today as well. There are 2 teams here locally that appear to be on their way to hopefully something special. BYU football, top 10 team, and they're undefeated at 8-0. For the second time this year, both Utah and BYU are on a bye prior to their big-time matchup coming up here in Salt Lake City on the 9th. 8:15. Ugh, I know. 8:15 first kick, so we're all going to be in that stadium until about 1:30, 2 o'clock a.m. So, BYU playing really, really well. RSL is the other team that is in a position to maybe do something fun. I know fall is mostly football for a lot of you, but fall soccer is very dramatic. It's very entertaining. It's very engaging, and RSL is in action tonight. 7 o'clock Mountain Time, although Apple TV has the first kick listed at 6:50 p.m. So we'll get you ready for the playoffs tonight for Real Salt Lake and kind of preview that game and have a good time on this Tuesday. Good guest list on a Tuesday afternoon. Richard Smith is live in studio. 40 years in pro basketball, a number of different areas, scouting, coaching, and such, player development. We'll bring in Smitty to give us an idea of what's next for young Taylor Hendricks, what's next for the Utah Jazz. Band McMahon, the return of Tim McMahon, NBA Daily Assist style. Get Tim's thoughts on all things Jazz and all things NBA. Going to do a little college football with Kevin Reynolds from the Salt Lake Tribune today. He's going to join us. Brian Dunseth will roll by as well. Now, we're hoping it's Dunny. Trey's our backup, so we're really hoping it's Dunny. Let me repeat that. Trey is our backup, so we're really hoping it's Dunny, who I think is on the call tonight with some Apple TV stuff. So Dunny will get us ready for this big-time playoff match tonight in the market for RSL as they welcome in Minnesota. So, a lot to do. Richard Smith, Tim McMahon, Kevin Reynolds, Brian Dunseth, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that young man, Porter Larson, on a Tuesday afternoon. All right, so what do the kids say on social media? Some personal news?
Yes.
I no longer cheer for any of my sports teams.
Oh, you've drawn a line in the sand.
Yeah, personal news. The Jets have hitched their wagon to an old, weird quarterback who's not good anymore. The Yankees' bats have gone silent. The Knicks look broken. The cat stuff's not working so far. Cavs get them in the Garden. As I've talked about all week, I've never been more wrong about anything as far as how wrong I've been about Utah football. So I'm too blessed to be stressed. I'm choosing to focus on my blessings today, and I'm just not going to cheer for sports teams anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a big step.
I know.
That is a big step.
I know.
I think there's a way back for you, but a break might be a good thing. A break might be a good thing.
That's what we'll call it. We'll call it a healthy break.
Sabbatical?
We'll circle the wagons coming up, and then we'll see what happens after that. But how's your Tuesday afternoon? Everything good?
Tuesday's gone well. It's a bit rainy out. It's a bit not. It doesn't feel like winter yet, but it's getting a little chilly. So you can tell the seasons are definitely changing. Kind of a slow week locally as we go as far as football, college football goes with the 2 bye weeks, but so much other stuff going on. As you mentioned, NBA Jazz tip-off, RSL. I was at the hockey game last night, which was a bunch of fun. Maybe a hot take.
Uh-oh, right out of the gates?
I hope it's Trey. I hope it's Trey. You hope it's Dunny.
That's a hot and an irresponsible take from you.
Sorry.
On a Tuesday. So we'll see. Let me repeat one more time. Brian Dunseth is set to join us, but Trey's our backup, so let's very much hope that Dunny is available to get us ready for RSL. All right, let's get into it on a Tuesday afternoon. Smitty's going to be our first guest, but before we get to Richard Smith, courtesy of our good friends at Standard Restaurant Supply, your tailgate headquarters. Get everything you need to make your tailgate epic. StandardRestaurant.com is where you find them online, and they're conveniently located at 3500 Southwest Temple. On a Tuesday, time now for your opening tip. So for the second straight, well, not second straight, but for the second time this year, both Utah and BYU football are on buys, but obviously both these programs in a very different spot as we sit here on this Tuesday, heading in very different directions. So, look, we'll get into it here. Kalani Sitake did some media yesterday. No media for Coach Witt. He does not do media when there's a bye week. But I thought Kalani handled it very well. He talked about how fun it is for these two programs to be reunited. Of course, there is a lot of love between these two coaching staffs because there's deep friendship that is as a result of working together long hours. Ultimately, these guys, and I heard OC talking about this earlier, the lifestyle of a college coach, and quite frankly, any coach on any level, I think it's probably a little bit misunderstood by some folk who think it's probably a lot easier than it actually is. And when you go to battle with each other and you're on recruiting trips with each other and you spend, like during the season, these guys spend way more time together than they do with their families. And the reality of college football now with transfer portal, NIL, constant recruiting all year long is even the offseason is probably a bit more busier than it was once upon a time. And several dynamics have come into play. Like, I do think there was a little bit of a unnecessary sound the alarm fever pitch when Saban, retired and a couple of other college coaches decided to try their hand doing some other things. Tony Bennett stepped down just a couple of weeks before the college basketball season started. I don't know that we are going to see a mass exodus, but whenever a big-time coach decides that due to the current climate of what it's like to try to build a program with the modern day and age of college football, it does make me think about Kyle and whether or not and Kyle has always been very front-facing and direct about, wanting to adapt to the new reality of college football and doing the best they can to adapt to what the transfer portal brings and what NIL means. And I think it's probably fair to say that the Utah football results ever since this thing became a reality have been mixed at best, right? And, I'm not ready to look ahead to the offseason, but ultimately I do wonder what it's going to look like if this thing continues to go south as it has over the past 4 games. And south in a way that has been dramatic, that has been surprising, and quite frankly, shocking and stunning. 4 straight L's hasn't happened since 2017. It's only happened 4 times in 20 years with Coach Witt. And how much of the lack of results have to do with the program's inability to adapt? I don't know the answer to that. I'm honestly just thinking out loud because there is part of me that feels like we can still be extremely reductive and talk about the lack of health under center as the main impetus for what I perceive to be a very disappointing year. Now, as we've talked about on the show, and we'll continue to talk about all week, it's not just quarterback play, but it feels like that is the biggest deal by far. Whether it's Cameron's health or for the second straight season, the program not being prepared adequately for the contingency they had in place should Cameron go down. I think early on after the trip to Stillwater, OK State, that win, we felt like, okay, Isaac certainly looks better than Bryson or Nate did last year. And, last year, obviously, it wasn't just Cam. It was Brandon Rose, too, who got hurt. But as time has gone on and we realize Oklahoma State is a sieve, they're probably the worst team in the conference, ultimately the performance under center, no matter who it's been, has not been good enough. I thought it was interesting to hear Scott Mitchell on the show yesterday say that he would ride with Brandon. And he felt like Brandon looked better than Isaac in a small, truncated space. Obviously, Brandon threw the pick that gave Houston the field position that ultimately led to the game-winning field goal. And I think it's fair to say, and you don't blame the kid because last year he was trying to throw touchdowns against Sky Ridge, and less than a year later he's asked to figure out Big 12 defenses. 18 years old, enrolled in April. I have a hard time putting any of this on Isaac. I do think – so I got to be careful here. The way I would characterize it is I think for the most part the kids up there playing football have been let down by the grown-ups in the room. Whether it was the handling of Cam's situation, which once again going back and forth, whether, it was ultimately making the right calls when it came to who was going to back him up and then making sure that Isaac was set up to succeed. Of course, Andy has stepped aside, Mike Bajakian in. And as I said last week, I just was very skeptical that Mike was going to be able to find anything in an Andy Ludwig installed offense that Andy couldn't find himself. I understand the cliches of new voice, new energy, new eyes. Okay, but this isn't pro football. You can't go make a bunch of trades if you need a left tackle, a running back, or a wide receiver. It's the same positional group. It's the same system. It's the same offensive, modality, ethos and such. And what will it look like against Brigham Young? Because ultimately, your season has come down to playing spoiler if you're a Ute fan. And that is a bad commentary on where you're at as a program. You do not want to be the plucky little school that might upset BYU season, that might knock off Iowa State and make sure they're not undefeated. Like, that's not what you want to have left to play for, but honestly, that's kind of all it is. So the other thing that Scott was talking about yesterday, and I've heard this from more than a few different people, is ultimately, as both programs, but certainly the University of Utah expanding their recruiting footprint to try to grab players that aren't necessarily only in our backyard. I mean, you can just go down the list. We've got California, Washington, we've got Texas, a bunch of Florida, a bunch of California, Montreal, Canada, Damien Alford from Montreal. And I could keep going. Mesa, Arizona, Atlanta, Georgia, Kahuku, Hawaii, Tampa, Florida. And as a result of the majority, when you look at the roster of these players being from out of state, do they really understand what Utah BYU football means? If you didn't grow up with it, and honestly, if you didn't grow up here, you may not have had access to it, and you don't really understand exactly what it means to people around here, right? I think BYU is a little different. They have a lot more of the local flavor, but they've expanded their footprint as well. So what I would say, in the off chance that college kids are listening to sports talk radio, this game means a lot to a lot of people, and you honestly can change the sentiment around your program with a dominant win over your rival. And as an individual, I mean, there's a reason why we remember the blocked field goal, Brandon's blocked field goal. Brett Ratliff is still a name that we talk about around here. Scott Mitchell, who pulled off a remarkable win over Brigham Young when nobody thought they could do that. Eddie Johnson, back in the day. I could keep going. If you have a big-time performance against Brigham Young in football, you're remembered here in a much different way, even if you're playing for a team that, let's face it, and let's be honest, no matter what happens the rest of the way, whenever we look back at Utah football 2024, we will wonder what could have been. Same thing with the team last year. But even if you're playing for a team that has been disappointing by any measurable metric, you blow the brakes off of Brigham Young, you go blow their doors off, it will change the way that people in this community view you moving forward and forever. That's how much this game means to a lot of people. And I do understand that if you didn't grow up here, it doesn't carry the same weight. And ultimately, as I referenced earlier, if you listen to Kalani Sitake's media availability yesterday, all he talked about is how much love and admiration and respect he has for Kyle. And we know Kyle feels the same about Kalani. And it's A-Rod, it's Jay Hill. I mean, there is so many cross-pollination relationships between the coaching staffs. Like the venom that exists, first of all, the venom that exists online, I don't give a rip about. If you guys want to go argue about big brother, little brother on the internet, go ahead and do your thing. And certainly some of the venom spills from online banter to certain situations that probably aren't great. I haven't seen a ton of that, and I've been to both Lavelle and Rice Eccles for BYU Utah. You do see some of it, and then you do hear a lot of rumors, that seemed like every time BYU was here, somebody would have beer poured on them. It's like, well, okay, probably not, because they don't sell beer at Rice Eccles Stadium. And if you're sneaking something in, it's not going to be beer. So I don't know what you thought it was. It probably wasn't. You hear some of those rumors. There's snapshot moments of Bronco Mendenhall going face-to-face with a Ute fan in suspenders, which was an odd look. The rumors about what happened to Coach Witt's wife by some BYU fans. I mean, stuff like that does spill over. But ultimately, there's a lot of love and respect between the coaching staffs. I don't know how much of the player, relationships are there anymore because of both of these programs expanding their recruiting footprint. So how many natural synergies and rivalries are there between the players? Can't really speak to that. Most of the bad behavior comes from people online or fans from both programs. But there is an opportunity still for Utah football to change the sentiment around this football team, and it comes in 11 days. If BYU comes up here, by the way, the line has been released. According to USA Today Sportsbook, BYU is a 4.5-point favorite. And you can get other lines, like right now, it looks like on FanDuel, BYU is a 3.5-point favorite. So the line is kind of oscillating a little bit in that area. But BYU is the favorite. Every sports book, they're a top 10 team. They're undefeated. They come up here to Salt Lake, and Utah football sends them back down to Provo with a dominant L. And Brandon or Isaac have a great game. Mekhi Bernard goes for 150 and a couple of touchdowns. You instantly change the way you're viewed in this community. That's how much this game means. And even if you didn't grow up here, you probably should get familiar, because at this point, there's not a lot of great sentiment surrounding Utah football, but you can change that by being great for one day. And that comes your way. Hopefully the opportunity does in 11 days. All right, Smitty's going to be live in studio. Before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million active members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. It's really easy to play. So, like, if you've never tried to bet on sports before, you don't have to learn about lines. You're not in a lobby with 200,000 other people. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. So, like last night, Russell Wilson, more than 200 passing yards. Steelers defense, less than 5 sacks, things like that. It's very easy. You just have to get 2 right, and you could actually win some real money. So bottom line is they're giving you free money to try it out, which you should do. So download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Enter the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Smitty, live in studio, coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Nobody better in the world to talk Jazz basketball with. Smitty live in studio. Tim McMahon's going to roll by today, NBA Daily Assist style. Back to college football with Kevin Reynolds. Sam Bruckhouse will stop by to do some NFL. Then we'll get you ready for a big RSL match tonight as the playoffs are here. Fall soccer is here. So we're going to bring in Brian Dunseth coming up in a little bit. But my guy, Richard Smith, on a Tuesday, even though it's a Tuesday, I had a lovely weekend in Park City at a wedding. It was a good time. Saw some old friends I hadn't seen in quite some time. What kept you busy this weekend, Smitty?
See that, Spence? We had divergent weekends going on. I actually went to L.A. To see an old friend of ours, an old NBA colleague of ours down in L.A. And I got to take a moment out of the visit with him to go to Game 2 Saturday night, and right here live on the radio that people can't see, I'm presenting Spence with his own special World Series ball.
What? Oh, wow. Smitty, are you serious?
Because that's the kind of guy I am.
You are a good guy.
See that? Put the ball on, and
Smitty, thank you.
You bow to it every time you walk by.
So here's the real question. 20-year anniversary of the greatest comeback in sports history.
How about that? I know.
Can my Yanks get a little Bo Sox magic and try to come back for the trio?
Well, anybody who remembers that, back in 2004 between the Red Sox and Yankees in the ALCS, the year before, it was Aaron Boone who had the walk-off home run in
Isn't
Game
it Aaron
7.
Bleepin' Boone?
Well, it is, but I know this is a family show.
It is.
And
99% of the time.
Yeah, and that was off Tim Wakefield, the great Red Sox pitcher. Rest in peace. And then the next year they're playing again in the ALCS, and the Red Sox are down the ninth inning, down a run, and the greatest reliever in history is on the mound for the Yankees. It's all over. This is a 4-game sweep. You got to be kidding me. And then Kevin Millar, who has made a living since then off his rant before the game, walking around anybody who would listen, and they got him on camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying, don't let us win tonight.
Yeah, no,
don't let us win tonight.
Yep.
Because then we got PD tomorrow, and then we got Schill in Game 6, and then anything can happen in Game 7.
Mm-hmm.
So they better not let us win tonight.
Yep.
And then he's the one who drew the walk in the bottom of the ninth, and Dave Roberts came in and ran for him and stole second and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, the Yankees could do something, and they're at home, right? Just like the Red Sox were. So they have a chance to do something and, maybe try and claw their way back in. But tell you what, the Dodgers seem to be just in one of those grooves that you can get in any kind of a playoff series in any sport, where all of a sudden you can't plan it and you can't map it out, but all of a sudden things just start falling your way, one thing after another, and it starts snowballing, to wit, the Freddie Freeman. I don't know. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? He's got a bum ankle. I don't know. Oh, home run. Like, that's the kind of stuff that you can't plan for and you can't make it up, and that you're just in the middle of right now for the Yankees and the Dodgers.
So it's funny because as I'm watching the playoffs, I felt like the Yankees had a far superior roster as they were making their way through. And now I feel the same way about the Dodgers juxtaposed to the Yankee lineup. Like, there's no oxygen. There's no break for the Yankee pitchers. Because even some of their, the batters at the end of the lineup, one just won the MVP of the conference champion, when they won the pennant, right?
Yeah.
So I thought the Yankees had a better starting pitching, but clearly the Dodgers, top to bottom, have a much better lineup, and all the momentum's on their side as of now.
I do think the Yankees have better pitching. They are lined up better, too. But again, look, it's one swing in Game 1, right? The Yankees are a pitch away from winning Game 1, and the series would still have a different tone if Freeman doesn't connect on that. But that's what happens in a series, right? One play, one swing. One missed ground ball, one error here. I mean, how about the two plays at the plate last night? Like
that Teoscar, that throw was right on point.
But like how close were both of those? Yep. I mean, it was an inch or two. Like you can't tell on a replay the guy was safer out. I mean, it's both of those, and but that's what makes baseball so exciting, especially this time of year.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and
Otani's banged up, and they don't need him. It's ridiculous.
That's right.
All right, Smitty. Fun night last night with so many things going on. So flipping back and forth between Monday Night Football, World Series, Utah Hockey Club, and then I get a text saying, "Did you see what just happened to Taylor?" So I switch over in time for the replay, which I did not need to see. I don't like the Kevin Ware kid, the Louisville injury back in March Madness.
You know what I thought of? I thought of Joe Theismann.
Joe Theismann,
Yeah.
Paul George,
Yeah.
Gordon Hayward, right? Like whenever these things happen, I don't enjoy watching it. So Taylor Hendricks, who, according to people that I talked to over there, worked his tail off all summer, got his body in better shape. He looked bigger. He looked stronger. Was off to a pretty solid start to the season. Some good defensive minutes on John Morant opening night. He played Luka pretty well last night on a couple of occasions as well. As you referenced, I don't know that Taylor is ever going to be a guy that's going to drop 40 on you. I'm not sure he's ever going to be like a 20-point-a-night guy. I don't think he has to because of his measurables, his ability to guard, rebound, and also finish at the rim. But what does this mean now as far as the what's next for Taylor? As Will mentioned last night, the development obviously is on hold. It sucks. It really does. But your thoughts on young Taylor Hendricks probably being out for the year now?
Yeah, it's a devastating injury. And the freakish part about it, Spence, is all these injuries that you see that happen, whether it's football, whether it's on an NBA court, someone sliding into a base in baseball and jamming their leg, whatever it is. This thing happened right in plain view of everybody with nobody around him. He was just running down the court and went to stop, and his leg just completely gave out on him. Just a freak accident. He'll rehab. He'll get back. The Jazz, I think, will be super ultra conservative in his rehab. It's not like they need him back for any kind of a playoff push in the spring. It's not like they're depending on him to come and save the day in terms of their season or what their plans are currently with this roster. So they're going to let him do the rehab he needs to. They're going to rely on the doctors who are involved. They're going to set the path. They're going to set the schedule of what he has to do surgery-wise, rehab-wise, getting back to playing condition ultimately. All that stuff, they're not going to rush it. They want to make sure he's okay. He's only 20 years old, Spence, so they realize he's got his full career ahead of him. So they're going to do everything they can to make sure that he's okay physically, that he's okay emotionally, which is a big part that a lot of people being better 2 years from now. All those things being better 2 years from now. All those things play in your mind as a young man. And so that'll be one of the things that their staff with Ron Kimmons, who's their psychological player rep, within the group, he's going to try and help him on the mental side to make sure that he's okay during the rehab process. And look, Spence, just because he can't play doesn't mean he won't be working on his body. He'll be working on his upper body. He'll be working on that kind of conditioning that'll give him time to add a little bit more weight, to add some more strength, and to do some of those kinds of things along with his rehab of his leg to make sure that he's okay, whether that's 12 months from now or 15 months from now, whatever it is, and try and get him back on the floor when it makes sense for him and when it makes sense for the organization.
And excuse me, I don't want to be over dramatic here, so I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but this is not a sprained ankle. This is not a jammed wrist.
Yeah.
This is a serious injury.
Yes.
And Taylor's a really, really good athlete. So he relies on his verticality and his speed side to side. If he's ever going to be an elite defender, he's got to move laterally. So, look, the fact that, and the staff down there, obviously a great reputation for caring for their players, and the fact that he's 20 is a good sign for long-term recovery. But this is an injury like Marquise Chris had it, and that essentially kind of knocked him out of the league. Like, we have seen this injury essentially change the scope of careers for players. So give me your thoughts on Jazz fans, the hope that we do see Taylor back at peak potential at some point?
Oh, well, he's going to, every individual is different. They all heal differently. They all approach it supposedly the same way. Some guys, cheat a little bit left and right, depending on what they're supposed to do along in the process. Some guys are more patient than others. Some guys adhere to the strict rules of what they're supposed to be doing along the way. A lot of it is going to be on how he approaches it, and again, Spence, not just the physical part, but the mental part of how he thinks about the process, how he goes about it, the people around him, how they're coaching him to handle it on both the physical and the mental side of it, and then you just have to wait and see how he comes out. Yeah, some guys get healthy. The doctors say you're ready to go. You're all mended. You're good. And the guy just has a mental block about doing something because they're afraid it's going to happen again. Yeah. And that's a big thing, especially at the pro level. And so that's going to be part of it for him, is the maturing process as he is a young man, not only dealing with the injury and the rehab part of it, but as he comes back, how can he get his frame of mind back to where it needs to be able to at some point compete at the highest level in this sport. That's going to be the thing that's going to be for him, and that's going to be something that's going to take patience.
One more thing on this, then we'll move on. We were very spoiled by two of the greatest Iron Men in NBA history when the Jazz were at their apex with John and Carl. And I'm wondering if you could provide some insight, because I intentionally went back to watch Will last night and then interviews of the players. Keontae and Walker, I couldn't see it, I was only listening. It sounded like they were crying. And if you go back and watch Will, he was holding back emotion. So as far as the effect that it has on his teammates, as Keontae said, his brothers, who he works shoulder by shoulder, and the effect that it could have kind of on the rest of the group, what's the best way to kind of try to traverse that space?
Well, again, that's going to be a group effort, and their mental preparation is going to be key. How they communicate with each other, how the staff works through that with them. It's not just Taylor, of course. That's a whole separate thing that they'll be dealing with him and giving him the priority of their efforts and their knowledge. But at the same time, you've got a whole group of guys who witnessed it, and they're now thinking in the back of their minds, "Oh, am I the next guy? Is something weird gonna happen to me?" And so the fragility of the group, the mindset of how they approach their task is always interesting, because you really need everybody focused together, but you need people around you, whether it's coaches, whether it's the support staff, to be able to help in terms of coaching them through the mental part of being able to deal with it. Not just that Taylor's not here, he's not with us, we can't count on him to help us now. We've got to be able to move forward with our group, but we also have to do so in a way that where we can perform the way that we want to. And sometimes the mental part holds you back. And so that's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how they respond as a group. Look, when you're in the middle of the game, guys are playing, guys aren't thinking about that stuff. But all the stuff outside of the game, when you're on the road, when you're in a hotel room by yourself, when you're sitting in the locker room before practice or after a game or whatever, those are the times when your mind can kind of wander to those things. And you have to have the people around you as a group to support you, to make sure that you're all working on the same level and all working in the same direction to try and get everybody together on the same page.
So rotationally, what this does is really open up about 30 minutes a night. So Taylor played 29 against the Grizzlies. Against the Warriors, he played 25. And then last night, 21, but then he left the game. So about 27, 28 minutes a night, probably it opens up. So if we go off of what they've been saying, it's development, youth. We want to learn what we have with the young players. And when you look at what Will has at his disposal, he could bring in John Collins. And that would be a pretty big front court with Walker, John, and Lowry. He could bring in Bryce Sensabaugh. We could see a little bit more of Cody Williams, and maybe even a little bit more of Kyle Filipowski. So with about 27, 28 minutes now, open up. What do you think rotationally we see?
Yeah, well, you just named all the options they're going to have. And I think it's probably going to be a rotating door depending on the matchups from night to night, the teams that playing, who the opponent is. They could go smallish with Sensabaugh as a 3. They could go bigger with Filipowski, and move him and Markkanen around depending on who they're playing on any given night. Like, for example, tonight they're playing the Sacramento Kings, who have a set rotation, a set lineup. They have a starting 5 who are here early in the season. It's only been a handful of games, but their guys are playing 34, 36 minutes a night. So they got a regular group that's playing and a group that's set to try and win this year, to try and get something accomplished for them. So they're a group that's going to come in, with their own agenda. So every night the Jazz are going to be facing a different team that has a different approach based on where they're at in their team development situation, whether they're competing for playoffs, whether they're competing for a championship, whether they're just trying to get in the playoffs, whether they're a developmental team like the Jazz are, say like Portland is, or something like that. So it's gonna be a rotating door. I think it's going to be something where they're going to be giving different guys different looks with different groups on the floor, and to see who works well with each other. And I don't think it changes a lot, Spence, in terms of the approach they're going to take as the season goes along in terms of rotation. I think they're just going to be trying to find out who we got, who plays well with who, what makes sense on any given night. And it may be different guys. It may be Sensabaugh could play one night as a starter and play 32 minutes because he gets on a little bit of a roll, and then 2 nights later he doesn't even get in the game because the matchup isn't right, and they're trying to take a look at somebody else. And so that's what you're going to see. That's I don't think a lot of that changes for what the Jazz's overall approach going into this season was going to be.
So let's talk about some of the individual players we've seen so far and your thoughts. And I want to start with Keontae, but I want to start with a question. At what point, because I oftentimes say, like, when it comes to Summer League, don't worry about make or miss. When it comes to rookies, not many of them are going to shoot a very high percentage. But at what point do we worry about make or miss with Keontae? Because here are his college stats. At Baylor, he played 33 games. He shot 37% from the floor and 33% from 3, okay? So then we move over to his rookie year with the Jazz. He shot 39% from the floor and 33% from 3. And now we look at what we've seen as far as this start goes, and Keontae right now is 27% from the floor, 23% from 3. So college, rookie, start to second year, the make or miss numbers, we can't ignore them. Like, at this point, he has shown that he is a lead guard that can't shoot the basketball. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Like, at what point does that become a concern?
Yeah, well, it's a concern the whole time. I mean, but let's look at it this way. He in another 10 days or so, he turns 21 years old, okay? So he's a young guy, played 1 year of college, played 1 year of professional last year. Now he's starting his second year. The thing with him, with the Jazz, from my perspective, is that they're still trying to figure out whether he's a point guard or whether he's a scoring 2 guard. And I think, based on what he's done so far, for me, I think he's going to be best served long term in his career being utilized as a Jordan Clarkson type or a Lou Williams type, who's a smallish scoring guard, who's a volume shooter. I don't know if he's ever going to be a great shooter, but he can be. I mean, look, I think his shot selection needs to improve, and that's not anything different than any young guy who's trying to feel his way. I think the thing with him, for me, is that at the moment he's trying to figure out how to be a point guard, and he's trying to also figure out how to score at the NBA level. And one thing is hard enough to do on its own, but trying to do both those things at the same time and to be relied upon and to have the spotlight on you in that regard puts another layer to it. So I think the Jazz at some point, they have to figure out, is he going to be a point guard? Do we think he's good enough to do that? And if he is, then we need to work with him on being better with the ball and not trying to score as much, or are we just going to let him loose to do the Jordan Clarkson type thing? I think that's what's going to happen, as his season this year unfolds.
We'll catch a quick break. One more big segment with Smitty coming up on the other side. I want to tell you about my friends at Clearwater Distilling. It's the only distillery in Utah County open on Sundays. Great spirits, tasting room, and the nicest crew around. They have their limited release Wednesday whiskey batch number 2 right now, which is a mix of their bourbon and rye whiskeys. Try the Scandalous, the Renee, or their vodka now in most state liquor stores. Football season, of course, is here. Clearwater is the official spirits provider for our ESPN VIP tailgate that we have at every home game. So do yourself a favor, check out the tailgate, schedule a tour and tastings in their Victorian tasting room. It makes a great night, a great date night anytime, or a fun activity, authentic vintage prohibition prescriptions and decor. They got ultra premium spirits. Try the Renee, the Armagnac, the Josephine, or the Lorenz. You can buy their spirit in state liquor stores online, or take a trip to their beautiful distillery, grab some booze, some local cigars, and immerse yourself in the Clearwater distilling culture. More information can be found online at clearwaterdistilling.com. They're located at 564 West, 700 South in Pleasant Grove. All right, more with Smitty coming up next right here on ESPN 700. We have the triumphant return of one Tim McMahon to the program today. Ben McMahon will drop your NBA Daily Assist coming up in about, we'll call that like 30 minutes from right now. Then we have Kevin Reynolds from the Trib, covers BYU, undefeated. Sam, I'm going to go ahead and go with Bruckhouse. I believe that's what it is. He's been on the show before, so I need to learn his name before he hops on. Do a little NFL. Then we're going to bring in Dunny for some soccer. As RSL welcomes in Minnesota. Have you ever been to an MLS playoff match, Smitty?
Yes, I have. I have.
Fun, aren't they?
You know, and I've been to several. You know, I've become a Real fan. The last several years, we have good friends, the Farleys, who have season tickets, and they let us come with them. And we, I don't know about like tonight, where it's going to be freezing out and it's going to be a little dicey. You know, I usually when I go there, it's 90 degrees out in the sun and we're sweating and whatever. And that's what's funny about soccer, right? It starts in the cold in March, and then in the middle of the season, the sun is out and it's hot and it's 95 and whatever. And then at the end of the season, it's back to being cold again when you're watching the game.
The season is way too long.
Yeah, it's funny.
Bizarrely long.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
we'll be cheering for RSL tonight.
Yes.
Donnie's going to hop on, get us ready for that match.
That's great.
All right, Smitty. So, look, it's 3 games in, but it is sports radio. So it's not like I'm worried about Lowry. Nobody should be worried about Lowry. Had a great game 1 against Memphis, and then the last 2 games, he's a combined 8 of 32. And it's clear he's on the first page of the scouting reports, right? So Golden State ran a couple of guys at him. Dallas, he was their main point of emphasis defensively. So what have you liked most about Lowry's start, and what do you make of the past couple of games when he is going to be the number one dude the teams are watching out for, how he's kind of adapting to that role? Yeah,
and that's what he's going to get every night. So he's going to have to get used to that. And the other guys who are in the so-called developmental stages and are just going to have to be able to start pulling some weight to help him, to free him up a little bit more. I mean, he's still shooting. It's early in the season. It's only 1 week, Spence. We spend 26 weeks in the NBA season. They played 1. So they played 3 games out of 82, but he's still shooting the ball okay, from distance when he's open. Early season here, he's shooting 47 from 3, 85 from the line. I still think he's a potential 180 guy for a season, but he's going to have to get more help. I do like the early season play of Colin Sexton. I think he's playing with his usual passion, his usual aggressiveness, but it looks like he's playing a little bit tighter, a little bit smarter, and again, that speaks to his maturity in the league now, and I think they're going to have to rely on him as well. And then whether you throw in the guys like Clarkson and Collins, or if they're even going to be here, during the season as the season unfolds, if the Jazz are going to do something with them, which I don't know anything about that. But it doesn't seem like those guys fit in with what they're trying to get done long-term with this group. So some of those young guys are going to have to play, and they're going to have to start pulling a little bit of weight to just take some of that burden off of Markkanen.
So, and I always say this, we can only go off their word. We can only go off what they're saying. And as you and I both know, there's what the front office says to the media and the public, and then there's what actually goes on, okay? But whenever Danny and Justin speak, it's development, youth. We got to see what sort of hand we've been dealt. If the developmental program is working, Walker will be a case study this year because it's his 3rd year in the program, right? I think it's been an A-plus start for him. Right now, through 3 games, Walker's at 10 points, 11 boards, 3 blocks. His shooting percentages are back to where you want. He's 68% from the floor, only 57% from the line. We need Walker to shoot better from the free throw line, but that's getting nitpicky because I think he's been among their best players through the first 3 games. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, well, he looks a little bit better to me. I like his rebounding. I like the fact that he looks like he's moving with a little more purpose when he's, especially on the offensive end. Look, these are early numbers, but if you told me now in October he's averaging, in this first handful of games, 10 points, 11 rebounds, and almost 3 blocks a game. If you said, would you take that in April and say, oh, that's what he did all year, I would say, give me that, because those are helpful numbers for a group that's trying to get better and trying to improve. Those numbers from a center position, with the way that they're constructed currently, would be a contributing factor to them getting better. So if he can keep up that kind of pace, I think that would be good. I don't think he should be doing anything that's off the charts, but anything that he can do where he averages a double-double, and I don't know if he can do that, if he can keep that up, but anything around those numbers. He's 10 and 11 now. If he ends up averaging 11 and 8 or something like that, with 2 blocks, a block and a half, whatever, that kind of thing, that would mean to me that he's made that incremental step in his third year to being a contributor to a winning effort.
So tonight he's got Sabonis, right? So the Kings are in town, and Sacramento 1-2, first 3. They bring in DeMar DeRozan in the offseason. But Walker's got Sabonis, who right now is 23 points, 11 boards, about just under a block, 6 assists, because he can pass it like his dad.
Yeah, he's.
So what is Walker up against tonight?
He's going to get worked tonight by Sabonis, and because DeMontis can go outside, and that's the thing. He can go outside, and if he gets Kessler in space at all, now he can go to work. He's got a great pivot move. He's got great footwork, and he'll be able to set up. He can make elbow jumpers. He can even step back off of that. If you give him space, he can make that. If you get up on him, he's got the footwork and the ability to go 1-2 bounces and get right to the rim on a big guy like Kessler. So he's gonna have his hands full, because Sabonis is a different type of big man that doesn't really fit into the mold of what Kessler is usually used to guarding.
Since he is in town tonight, and I don't think I've ever asked you once about your experience with Trey Lyles.
Yeah.
He's still in the league. He's still playing significant minutes for a good team.
Yep.
And, I understood why you guys liked him. I thought it was easy to see a guy with that size and still with the skill that he has, put it on the floor, shoot a little bit. But what was the experience like from your vantage point when Trey was here? And obviously when he left, he had some things to say about Quinn that didn't seem to land very well.
Yeah, I don't know. He was always a quiet guy. Mm-hmm. Had great parents who were always here a lot. That involved in his career. Maybe a little too much on the pro level.
Okay.
But that's okay. They cared about him and about how he was doing. So I get that. And I had to deal with some of that in my role at the time, with the organization. But he's a good guy. He's a quiet guy. He was always, came to work. I always thought that he had another gear that he never really got to in any kind of consistent level. But then again, he was on that Kentucky team, with Devin Booker and the Jazz. We took Trey Lyles, and Phoenix, the next pick, took Devin Booker. Mm-hmm. So you can sit there and go, you guys, how dumb were you guys? You guys took Booker, a whole different story. Okay, all right, yeah. So you win some and you lose some. All right, mm-hmm. But Trey Lyles has been a serviceable journeyman player. Okay, Devin Booker has been a multi-time All-Star, a main guy, mm-hmm. and an Olympic gold medalist. Okay. So he's the guy. So, that's one of the things when you're scouting that's difficult on some of these so-called big blue blood programs, whether it's a Duke or a Kentucky or a Kansas, where they may have multiple NBA level guys on the team, and you see them play one year before they enter the NBA draft, but maybe you don't see everything that they can do, or maybe their shortcomings because they have to work within a confined space because they're with all these other guys. They're not the one star on the college team, like Dalton Connect last year in Tennessee, who's getting all the shots and getting all the attention and everything. They're there with a bunch of other guys, and sometimes guys get lost in the shuffle. That happened to Wesley Matthews way back at Marquette. He was playing with two other teammates who were all three of them were NBA guys, and he didn't show as much as maybe he could have, and in his collegiate career, his senior year, and the other two guys got drafted, and West didn't get drafted, and West comes into the Jazz Summer League, and through a series of events, ends up his second year signing a free agent, a contract with the way the rules were at that time, making more money in his second year than Blake Griffin, who was in the same draft class, who was the number one pick. I mean, just by a set of circumstances that we would have to go into on another show, but it's really it's one of those things where you really have to scrutinize who you're looking at in college, because you're never quite sure if all you're seeing is all that is there.
How much, while we're in this space, and I want to acknowledge how unfair this is as far as what I'm going to bring up, because to your point, everybody has hits, everybody has misses. So whenever anybody throws Trey Burke at me, I say, well, okay, Donovan late lottery, Gobert late first. Like, in order to be fair.
Yeah.
But how much of the misses, do you still think about it? Do you still think about Kawhi? Do you still think about Devin Booker? Do you still think about Jokic, Giannis? I mean, and everybody missed on those dudes. Let's be clear. But as a guy that evaluated talent, do those misses still kind of haunt you a little bit?
Well, I don't know if it haunts as much as you always try and be retrospective about, what you were looking at. And you got to make sure that you don't get caught into a mode of revisionist history. Mm-hmm. In other words, you have to remember that what you thought and what you had at that time in terms of information and intelligence was what you based a decision on, and you can't change that 5 years later and say, oh, well, we should have done this or we should have done that,
Everybody can do that.
Of course, and that's the Monday morning quarterbacking, and that's a lot of that, Spence, in my opinion, from the seat I used to sit in for a long time, is people who never did it before, and they always have the answers tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I'll give you the answer tomorrow. Okay, after the game tonight, I'll tell you who the best play. And so you have to work with what you have at that time. And hey, I was really high. I remember at the time on Robert Swift, who was coming out of high school and out of Bakersfield and looked like a big guy who knew how to set a screen, knew how to roll, had good hands. Could be a really solid big man in the league, and I think he had the skill or ability to potentially do that, but he had other things off the court that got in his way and derailed him from any kind of a lengthy career. But then there are other guys, whether it's a Paul Millsap at 46 or whether it was a Mo Williams at 46, and guys that you like and that are still there in the draft, and you go, well, I like this guy. I don't know why he's not gone already. He's and so if you get a chance at him now,
John and Carl.
Yeah, John and Carl. Yeah. John was taking 16, Carl was taking 13. But there's also all the guys that you liked that went somewhere else for whatever the circumstances were, and you were convinced, Spence Checketts, that guy, I really like him, and we were two spots away from getting him, and now the other team has him, and 5 years from now, he's a 4-time All-Star, and going, boy, those guys were really smart, and you're sitting there going, well, hey, I was pretty smart too. I just didn't get him, that kind of thing. So you have those kind of thoughts that you can get carried away with at times, but when you're in the heat of it, when you're in that space, you really have to be cognizant that you've checked all the boxes and that you're comfortable with whatever it is you're doing at that moment, because those are the things that live with you. Hey, look, a lot of people liked Donovan Mitchell, right? And the Jazz we were never going to get him at 24, which was where the Jazz were picking that year. And Dennis Lindsay made a great move with Tim Connolly in Denver to move up from 24 to 13, which, by the way, was when we traded Trey Lyles. So Denver liked Trey Lyles coming off his rookie year. So the Jazz traded Trey Lyles in 24 to get up to 13. Denver liked the move because they thought they were getting two, decent players, and Trey Lyles and the kid, I can't remember his name now, from Syracuse, that they drafted, who really didn't pan out, but they liked them at the time, and the Jazz were able to get Donovan Mitchell. Now, Dennis doesn't make that move, or Denver doesn't want to make a move, and Dennis can't get something done with the other teams, and Mitchell goes 17 to Portland or whoever it would have been, and then Donovan Mitchell never shows up in Utah and doesn't have the start of the career that he had, and there's millions of those stories, and sometimes it's always fun to go back and see what might have happened if just one different thing had taken place, whether it was during a draft process or during a workout process. Carlos Boozer came in, had a terrible workout with us, and we asked him afterwards, "Hey, what how come you?" And he tells us, "Well, we didn't. I haven't eaten in about 30 hours." And we go, "What do you mean you haven't eaten?" He goes, "Well, I didn't eat yesterday morning before I got on the plane because I thought there'd be food on the plane, and then they didn't have it, and so then I got here and I didn't have any money. I don't have a credit card, so I didn't eat last night."
Jeez.
Because at Duke they told us we couldn't order room service or anything when we're staying at the hotels, so I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. And Kevin O'Connor blew his stack, "What are you talking about? You got to eat and whatever." I remember Kevin famously in that meeting saying, "Look, Booze, wherever you go from now on, if you're hungry and you're not sure what to do, use my credit card and just buy some food wherever I don't care. I'll pay for the food. Don't do that."
Yeah.
And that's how Booze was. That's the kind of guy he was. And then we had him back for a second workout where just before the draft, where obviously he did much better, but we didn't get a chance at him because Cleveland took him early in the second round, and then we got him 2 years later, blah, 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 and all that stuff. But all of those are fun stories, backstories about things that did happen or things that didn't happen that could have happened if just one other thing had gone differently. It's that's what makes this business so fascinating.
Yeah, and the margin of error is so thin.
Yeah. It's
why winning it comes and goes.
That stuff is crazy,
Yeah.
and we always would use the comparison to a professional golfer, and all these guys. You got the top guys you always hear about now, whether it's Schauffele or Scheffler or Morikawa or whatever. But the guys who are 25 to 200.
Yeah.
They're basically the same guy, and one guy made a putt in a qualifying thing, and the
Chipped
other
in
guy
for
shanked one shot
Right, yeah.
off the tee or something, and then that was it. And it's that line of making it, not making it, successful, not successful is such a thin line. And there's so little margin for error.
I saw there's a video going around of I don't know if it was the Corn Ferry back in the day, but whatever the tour was that you had to play on to get to the PGA Tour, and there was a golfer who I think was in his mid-30s, and he had a chance to grab his card. All he had to do was 2-putt from 4 feet out, and he 3-putted because he just missed a tap-in, and he never had a chance to qualify again.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, and people
Imagine
never
living with that.
People never hear about those stories.
Right.
And they wonder, why I thought you were a good golfer. I heard a lot about you. I go, well, yeah, I was. Yeah, well, and it's hard to explain to people, how thin that line really is.
All right, Smitty, before I set you loose, we got about 30 seconds here. So this is probably not long enough to explain the whole thing. They're awful defensively. They're 25th in efficiency. They're 27th in scoring defense.
Yeah.
I know it's only 3 games, but they were the worst defensive team in pro basketball last year.
So they've improved.
I guess they're not last this year. They're third to last or fifth to last on efficiency and scoring. Like, how do we see a little improvement on that?
Well, they've got to be better, Spence, and there's no that's just work, that's just effort, that's determination, and again, through this developmental process and the stuff that the Jazz are going through now, they're going to find out who the guys are that want to play, who want to get after it. And when they identify guys that don't after a certain amount of time, they're just going to put them on the train and ship them out of town. They're going to go on to the next guy because they've got to get better. And especially defensively is one area you can do that with effort and determination and grit. And that's what they're trying to find.
Great to see you, my friend. Enjoy the game tonight, and we'll see you soon, okay?
Okay, Spence, I haven't said this in maybe ever, but go Yankees. Just for you. Just for you.
You rolling on that? Okay, Porter got
Just
that.
for you.
I'm going to have him clip that, and I'm going to use it as my ringtone. Let us get one game at least. All right, Smitty brought to you by Diamond Coat today. Diamond Coat Premium Home Siding. They're new here along the Wasatch Front, and you won't believe what they can do to your home's exterior. Diamond Coat Siding Next Generation System delivers the exterior transformation you deserve. To level up to the neighborhood standard, they're the total design solution that shows your personal style with endless styles and colors for limitless customization. And their 30-year no-fade warranty means your vision will last for decades to come. Designed beyond limits, beyond expectations with Diamond Coat, now available in the Salt Lake City area. Premium home siding, limitless potential, endless styles and colors. Total design solution, year-round weather ready, so it's durable in all seasons, which, of course, you need here in Utah. Discover more at diamondcoatsiding.com. That's Diamond Coat, spelled K-O-T-E, siding.com. Band McMahon joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Oh, man, it's been too long. But the triumphant return of the legend himself, some may say the GOAT when it comes to covering the Utah Jazz, Van McMahon, Tim McMahon, back on the drive on a Tuesday. Tim, how you been, man?
Howdy, partner. How are you?
We're well, we're well. Thanks for the time. We've missed you on the show. And, of course, it means basketball season is here when you make your appearance around these parts. We appreciate the time. And it is a dark and rainy day in Salt Lake, which matches the mood, Tim, because Taylor Hendricks, after spending a number of hours in the offseason improving his body and was off to a pretty good start, suffers a catastrophic leg injury that sees him lost for the year. What's your reaction, and what are you hearing about how he's doing?
Yeah, and I was in the building last night, and it was gruesome and gut-wrenching. I mean, the second you saw the direction that his leg was turned, you knew, like, oh, no, this is a really bad thing. And, Will already summed it up when he said, this is a part of sports. It sucks. I mean, the kid did everything that they asked him to do, everything they hoped he would do over the summer, got significantly stronger, really showed an incredible work ethic, earned the right to be in that starting lineup, was guarding the other team's best player, whether it's John Morant or Luka Doncic or, anybody in between on a nightly basis. Really had made major strides in his development. And again, to borrow from Will Hardy, all that is put on pause right now. His season's over. Typically in these cases, there's going to be surgery required. The further testing today is to determine the severity of it, specifically like the ligament damage, that kind of thing. But, I mean, really just, boy, what a gut punch and what a tough thing for a 20-year-old kid who had a rough rookie year and responded the right way to now have to deal with this.
Yeah, he, according to people I talked to over there, I'm sure you hear the same. Like, in order to develop as a young player, the main thing you have to show people you can do is work. And he showed everybody this offseason that he can work. I mean, you know the deal. Like, I oftentimes joke that in pro basketball, it's kind of the same thing as kind of National Signing Day in college football, where every coach says, well, we got every prospect we wanted. Like, well, you're ranked 72nd. Like, you didn't get everybody. And everybody in NBA training camps talks about, oh, it's muscle gain season. This guy put on 20 pounds. This guy put on 10. But Taylor walked into the building and went, oh, my gosh, like he looked different. And he was off to a good start to the season. And certainly, I guess before we move on, a thought on, I'm not a doctor. I don't try to play it on the radio. The Jazz certainly will not rush this, nor do they have to. Are you hearing anything about, is this going to be a full year situation? Any knowledge in that direction?
What I can say is that a typical recovery process from this sort of injury is right about that year. So, I don't have specifics from the Jazz quite yet on, MRI results and plans for surgery and that sort of a thing. But it would not be surprising, given the severity of this injury, if he's not ready for the start of camp or even the start of the regular season next year. I mean, this is a tough one. It's a really, really tough one.
Yeah, it is. And, Jazz have a great medical staff, and he's only 20, so certainly leave a lot of space for a long-term recovery that gets him back on track. But, I mean, it's hard to focus on anything else. I'm not sure if you heard last night. So, obviously, Will Hardy spoke, but then Keontae and Walker, I didn't see video, but I listened to the audio. It sounded like they were, crying, emotional. I mean, this is not just something that will affect Taylor. This locker room's going to have to move on from, as Keontae said, losing their brother.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Keontae, as the stretcher's coming out for Hendricks on the floor, he was covering his face with a towel and clearly, tearing up. I mean, it's the emotional thing, and then visually seeing this guy who you're in a locker room with, who you're on a plane with, who you're playing with on a daily basis, who you've developed this bond with, especially like Keontae coming in the same rookie class, and he's sitting there in shock, and his ankle is pointed outward, like that is just an extremely difficult thing to process on an emotional basis.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, it feels, kind of a little obtuse or whatever to talk about other dynamics, but we can't just hone in on that. So I wonder, and we just had Smitty in studio, and I was asking him the same question because, the Keontae stuff at at Baylor, he played in 33 games. He shot 33% from three, 37% from the floor. His rookie year for the Jazz, 75 games. He shot 39% from the floor, 33% from three. And he's off to even a worse shooting start this year with splits that are under 30 for three and just barely, 27% from the floor, 23% from three. So ultimately, he's only 20. He played a year of pro basketball. A year of college basketball. It's only his second year in the pros. But he's never proven to be an efficient shot maker. At what point is that kind of an issue?
And I would say you have to consider it a concern now, and you also have to have patience with a one-and-done player who is learning to play point guard at the NBA level. Didn't play in high school, didn't play in college. So, and playing aside from a few guys, playing with a bunch of young guys. So, again, you're going to have some patience with him and understand there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road. And, maybe he becomes a legitimate starting point guard in the league, and maybe he doesn't. There's no guarantees here.
There's not. And, while Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge talk a lot about development and the youth, and that's probably what we're going to see this year, I do wonder how Will's going to handle this because, look, Patty Mills is 36, okay? I'm not trying to make him anything that he's not at this stage in his career, but Will knows him from San Antonio. And I just wonder if Will's going to let Keontae go through a bunch of mistakes or if he's going to rely on the veteran. Game one against Memphis, in Patty's 16 minutes, they were plus 10. And Keontae's 31, they were minus 11. Patty didn't take a shot. He didn't take a free throw. He only had one board, one assist. But he came in, and the ball started popping. The ball started moving. So there is this dynamic of vets sitting behind these youngsters. And, I know they want development, but Will wants to win. How do you think he traverses that space this year?
Well, I think what you don't want is bad habits to develop, and if bad habits are developing, that's going to cost Keontae George minutes. If he's doing the right things and getting the wrong results, I think it's a completely different kind of conversation. So, but listen, Keontae's development is a priority for the organization, and there's also an understanding that, from a wins and losses and standings perspective, this is probably not going to be a phenomenal season in the history of Utah Jazz basketball.
Which, as you know, I'm totally fine with. Like, if this is the situation, because the other thing is, it is a protected pick. If it's outside of the top 10, it goes to OKC. How much of the early losing do you expect to continue? And if it does, how much of that is intentional?
Sorry, I was going through I was trying to sneak my way through security without interrupting you. Can you repeat that question?
I'll ask you a much shorter question. Does it feel like they're actually tanking intentionally this year?
I don't necessarily know they're going to have to be intentional about it. I think the level of competition in the Western Conference and the quality and lack of experience of the players on the Jazz roster I think the results will take care of themselves. I think they will be well positioned to participate in a lottery that obviously is expected to produce not just one, but potentially a handful of franchise type of talents.
Give me your best guess rotationally what it looks like with Taylor out. You think they go John Collins? You think it's Bryce Sensabaugh? There's about 28 minutes available rotationally. How do you think Will handles it?
Yeah, Cody Williams might get some more time. My guess is probably he would err on the side of going with the vet in the starting lineup to open things up. But, I'll be honest with you, I really wasn't kind of poking around about that last night. There were, obviously other things, particularly the severity of Hendrick's injury that I was really focused on more in my reporting.
Yeah, for sure. Before I set you loose, if this is about development, then a year 3 Walker Kessler will give us a peek as to whether or not they're developing players. Through 3 games, I think it's been an A-plus start. 10 points, 11 boards, almost 3 blocks. His shooting percentage is close to 70. So really good first 3 games for Walker. You think it's going to continue?
Listen, he had a great summer. And, I think in hindsight, playing for Team USA in the World Cup was a mistake for him. He needed to be in a weight room. He needed to be, working on his game in the gym. And last year was kind of a humbling thing for him. He went from an all-rookie season to being, let's be honest, widely considered a disappointment as a sophomore. But again, you talk about the way people respond to disappointment. And I can just tell you, when I ran into Will Hart in the preseason, he said, "Wait until you see Walker. He's bigger, he's stronger. Like, he looks good. Like, he came in ready to compete this year." So I can tell you, Will's not a guy who blows a lot of smoke. If he's pumping a guy up and saying he's happy for what he's been doing, that means he's been doing the right things. And I think he's talked about it. He added, hashtag muscle watch, but he is bigger. He did add about 20 pounds, and I think he's humbled and came in ready to prove that all the optimism about him during his rookie season was accurate, and he's ready to back that up.
All right, brother. Well, good to hear your voice. Glad to have you back. We'll set you loose and look forward to catching up soon.
Sorry to rush you on this one. I got an early tip tonight, but we will make up for it in the weeks to come.
All good. All good. There is Tim McMahon, covers the NBA for ESPN. He is the ESPN beat reporter on the Jazz beat, so we like to bring him in to get the latest with the Utah Jazz. Yeah, it feels a little insensitive or, futile at this point to talk about anything other than the horrible scene we all saw yesterday, and just thinking of Taylor. And, man, Jazz have a great medical staff. He's 20, so I'm sure he'll get back and he'll be fine, but probably won't be for a year, which does hinder the development of what he could be. But step one, get healthy. Hopefully he's doing all right. All right, we will catch a quick break. Yeah, let's catch a quick break. We still have Kevin Reynolds. He's going to roll by to talk a little BYU and Utah football. Sam Bruckhouse for some pro football. Then Dunny's going to roll by to get you ready for tonight's big RSL match. RSL Minnesota MLS playoffs are here. A lot to do on a Tuesday. Keep it here on ESPN 700. All right, we're going to bring in Kevin Reynolds today to talk a little college football. It is a bye week for both BYU and Utah. The second time this year it's happened. Obviously, a new scheduling situation with the Big 12 stuff. So we'll get you ready for that game. We're going to have a lot of course, rivalry week. Say it slowly. In the business, we're going to have a lot of Daffy Ducks next week on the radio with Utah and BYU going at it. We're going to have a ton of coverage for you. We're going to be out and about on a couple of remotes. And as I referenced earlier, there's not certainly as much to play for Utah as we thought there would be, but there is still this game, which is not nothing. And even though it feels a little bit hollow because there will not be a Big 12 championship in Salt Lake this year, there will not be a CFP appearance despite the CFP expanding to 12. This game means a lot to a lot of people. I'm not sure if that reverberates in the locker room. In fact, Porter, let me kick the tires with you on this because I think when we first started doing the show together, you were one of the first that I heard kind of describe it in a way that I hadn't necessarily heard as far as because if you grew up around it like I did, if you went to school at either BYU or Utah like I did, now covering it in the media full-time for 18 years, you don't need any explanation. When someone says Utah, BYU, football, you know exactly what that means to people around here. But if you're 19 and you grew up in Florida, you're like, oh, okay, the Holy War, that sounds kind of odd. And then there's also this generation of Ute fans that I think are closer to your age that don't have the same, desire to see it played. So as we approach next week, where do you think the Ute players are at with his game?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a little bit different, right? You mentioned it there when your recruiting base, right? Your recruiting footprint isn't Ron McBride's recruiting footprint. It's not the Polynesian kids that are moving into state and your big in-state recruits. It's Southern California. It's Texas. It's Florida because of the Dennis Erickson pipeline, right? It's Morgan Scalley who is really got a foothold in Houston and the Fort Worth area, right? There's a difference when you didn't grow up in the rivalry. There's a different feel to it. There's less urgency to it, I think, when it comes down to the pressure on the game. Now, if you're a pro, now these guys are amateurs. These guys are college players, of course. But if you approach the game as a pro, you don't change the way you play because it's a rival. You go about your business, you execute, you play the same play every play the way you would regardless of who you're playing, right? But there is an edge you can get when you're playing your rival, right? There's an intensity you can get that I think you as a football fan, as maybe someone that played even at a high school level, you understand the edge you can get with a rivalry game. Maybe just a little bit of a different focus you can get in your locker room. And I think Kyle, regardless of who is in that locker room, Spence, is still pretty good at doing that, right? He's still really good at finding that motivation. So when I tell you these kids do view it differently, yes, I talk to Zach Moss, a kid who grew up in Miami, in the U, to him has nothing to do with the University of Utah until he came here, right? But once he got here, because of Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley and Quinton Ganther, guys that he play with, he understands the assignment. He understands the rivalry and very much approaches it with a seriousness that is a little different than most weeks. So, yes, there's a different approach to it, but I still think there is a lot of urgency. And Kyle specifically makes sure that anyone in that facility on BYU week or this time around, the 2 weeks you get to prepare for BYU, he makes sure everyone in that building understands that it's a little different focus at the very least.
When we hosted Dan Patrick here, which was my first go around with ESPN 700, which I guess would be 13 years ago now.
Wow.
I know, I'm getting old. Frank Dolce was with us.
Shout out Frank Dolce.
At dinner. And so Dan's asking us all these questions. He gets to Dolce. He's like, what's your story? And Frank goes, I played quarterback at the U. And Dan said, you played quarterback at the University of Miami? And Frank said, no, the U. And Dan he'd never heard it before. He's like, what do you mean there's one U? It's
right.
Miami. And Frank said, well, here there's also a U. And so Dan had never heard the University of Utah referred to as the U. So when Dolce told him he played quarterback, he thought he, played at Miami. And
Won a
Frank,
national title or so.
And Frank was not necessarily that level. And he has cankles. We'll catch a break. All right, coming up on the other side, we are going to bring in Kevin Reynolds from the Trib. But before we catch a break, let's welcome in Jeff from Farmer and Chemist. Jeff, happy Tuesday, sir. How are you?
Yeah, great. Happy wet Tuesday.
Yeah, it is indeed. It is indeed. So let's start with Farmer and Chemist, the ability that you have to help people sleep well without the need for any sort of medication that is addictive and causes long-term issues. How can you help people that need to sleep a little bit better?
It's finding the right product for the right person or patient. And so what we see is combining different cannabinoids like CBN and CBD together, and with or without a little THC, is a really good scientifically driven option for sleep that doesn't have the addictive potential that you see with some of the prescription medications.
Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so it really is about what I would love, to be the message is the dosing matters, the route of administration matters, how you use it matters, the combination matters. And so we would love to have people come in and talk to us as pharmacists. We would love to have that conversation and be that resource so people feel comfortable that they're getting a good quality product.
And what's the best way for people to do that, to come in, to ask you questions, just so they can get educated? Then also, Jeff, let's hear about that special offer you have for our listeners.
Yeah. So we have a store in Midvale. It's right in the middle of the valley, just off of I-15. We would love to have people come in and spend some time with us. If that's not possible, Doug, my partner, and I, we're both pharmacists. We would love to jump on a phone call and walk people through any issues they have and answer any questions. So either option works, and either way, if you purchase something either online or in the store and you mention ESPN 700, we will take 20% off of any order.
Jeff, thank you, sir. Have an excellent week, and we will chat soon.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Check them out, Farmer and Chemist. It's an excellent spot, really classy joint. Go in and say hello, ask them questions. They're all pharmacists. They're all really nice people. So we appreciate having them as a partner on ESPN 700. $25 to Farmer and Chemist.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you should have told me. Now I got to come up with something off the top of my head. We're going to do a lot of rivalry stuff next week. Should we kick the tires?
This is true.
Should we kick the tires right now? All right, 877-353-0700. From a Ute fan perspective, here's what I'll ask. I believe I'm up to 5 people that I know of that went to the U, not Miami, University of Utah, and they have sold their tickets for Utah BYU. Let's take a quick pulse, 877-353-0700. Ute fans, are you going to the game? I'm just going to ask you simply.
You're DQ'd if you're not.
How are we going to execute that? It's like mass deportation. It's not even possible. We can't DQ every Ute fan that doesn't go to the game.
We go in there.
Just give us a hot take. Are you going? Yes, I love the Utes. Are you not? No, I don't want to go to priesthood and get made fun of by my Y bros. I don't know.
Just your enthusiasm level and why.
Yes, a why on this show. A why is always important. We are not reductive. Okay, not one statement. We do not get reductive on this program. 877-353-0700. We will send you to Farmer and Chemist with $25 in your pocket. All right, college football up next with Kevin Reynolds. Keep it here on ESPN 700. For the second time this year, which feels really weird, not going to lie, Utah and BYU football are on a bye. For the first time this year, they will play each other. And so still a lot to play for, depending on, I suppose, your view of this rivalry game. BYU is a slight favorite, depending on the sports book. I've seen about 3.5, about 4.5. That was according to USA Today. I think FanDuel has Brigham Young as the slight favorite. They're undefeated. Utah is very much not. Our next guest covers BYU and college football for the Salt Lake Tribune. My guy, Kevin Reynolds. Kev, happy Tuesday, man. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing, man?
I'm well. Appreciate the time. So, as a transplant here in our market, you've lived here for a number of months now, been doing the job for more than just a minute. Do you feel like you have a accurate frame of reference for what BYU Utah football means around the market?
You know, I've been told a lot about it, and I've heard a lot about it over the last few years, but I've actually never seen this game in person because it's never been played since I've been here. So in a weird way, you know, I've heard so much about this game over the last few years that I feel like I have a relative understanding of what to expect, but also I've been here 2 years and I haven't seen the game in person. So I'm interested to experience it in person for the first time in 2 weeks.
See, I find this really interesting because let me follow up. Growing up, obviously you're a football fan and obviously a college football fan. Did you have any exposure to BYU Utah football? I mean, it's a massive rivalry here. I think it's gained a lot of traction locally because both teams are now in P4 conferences. But was it ever part of your college football consumption growing up?
I'll be honest, coming as a Rutgers fan growing up and being on the East Coast, I didn't get to see a ton of BYU or Utah games or really anything on the West Coast or in the Mountain Time Zone. So I really haven't watched this game even on television live. But as you grow up and I moved to Texas and you're kind of a little bit closer, you definitely hear about it more. I'd say, honestly, the first time that really I think I heard about it was probably 2015, around that time. But, yeah, I growing up as a kid, no, I hadn't heard a ton about this.
See, I've been talking about this on the show because Scott Mitchell hopped on yesterday, and you can pull up, well, quite frankly, Kev, you can pull up both Utah and BYU's roster, and, you know, in a way that it just wasn't like this back in the day. I think there were, look, there's still plenty of local representation, but, you know, both BYU and Utah have, I would say, just from a quick glance, the majority of their players are from out of state. Certainly on Utah's side, BYU certainly has, I think, a little bit more local flavor, but we've got Texas, we've got Virginia, we've got California. I could keep going. Pittsburgh, of course, a lot of Kahuku kids, Hawaii. And it doesn't seem like the players who, some of them are around your age, due respect, who didn't grow up here, it didn't seem like this game really was part of their experience in college football. And therefore, I wonder how many of the players actually understand how much it means to the community. I wonder what your thoughts are on that when you're not raised with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely an aspect to this, especially because, you know, just talking to guys in the last few weeks about this game, a lot of these guys in this game, at least from BYU's side, have not played in this game and really have to learn about this one. I mean, you look at Jake Retzlaff, right? He grew up in California, and he's talked about it, how, you know, he hasn't played in this game. He's heard a lot about this game, but BYU came onto his radar, you know, not maybe as a 5 or 6 year old, but it came onto his radar a little bit later as he, you know, grew up around football, and then he became a college prospect and all those types of things. And I think you can go down the list. There's certainly guys on this roster. Like, I don't want to say that that's the universal truth. Like, there's plenty of guys on this BYU team who understand the rivalry, grew up in Utah, you know, Chase Roberts, who've been recruited by both programs, right? So I think there is a lot of that connection. And certainly on the coaching staff, there's a lot of connection. You know, look at BYU's coaching staff. So I don't want to say that this is just a universal thing. I think there's a ton of connections here and a ton of people who understand what this means from both programs' side. But I do think there's definitely some prominent figures in this rivalry this year who are learning about it for the first time, especially because this hasn't been played since 2021. I mean, this is the longest break in the rivalry since, I think, 1942 to 1946. So I think that plays a factor, too. And even the guys who have been on BYU's team for 1 or 2 years, since they've kind of made the transition to the Big 12, they haven't played in this game, and they haven't seen this game. So I think that adds a little bit of a layer to this.
So it's interesting to view it from this perspective. I mean, all time, Utah leads the series 62, 35, and 4, although BYU, I think, likes to throw out a lot of the early Utah wins because they were known as, Brigham Young Academy. So BYU fans, whenever they lose, they get a little tricky with numbers. They don't really ever lose, so that's just kind of the deal. But when I was growing up, it was Lavelle and it was BYU every year. I mean, like almost every year. Utah in 1988 had a stunning 57-28 win. The next year, BYU hung 70 on them, and Utah just never really beat BYU. Ronnie Mack took over, and he found some success against BYU in the early 90s. And then, recently it's a generation of more or less dominance. Utah 14-4 in the last 18. BYU did win the last one, but prior to that, Utah beat them 9 straight times. And, Utah goes to the Pac-12. BYU was kind of left out in the wind. They decided to do this really awkward independent thing that was certainly met with mixed reactions. And I think it's fair to say had mixed results. And so while Utah was kind of making their way through P5 football in the Pac-12, BYU was trying to find footing. And during that time, Utah stomped them. But this year, Kev, BYU is they're going to smell blood in the water, man. Like, I am sure they're sick of hearing basically everything I just said and hearing and dealing with results that more or less have been one-sided for nearly 20 years now. And with the way they're rolling and with how confident they're playing, they're only a slight favorite. But, they're going to want to come up here and make a statement, regardless of what Kalani says about how much he loves Kyle, right? And so with BYU at 8-0, I think there's a feeling up this way that this game might get a little loose. Yeah.
I mean, I think because growing up, I mean, we talked about the start of growing up, what rivalries did I watch? And I think a lot of the times it was, Penn State, Ohio State, it was Ohio State, Michigan. Like, those were the big rivalries that I think were in prime time in New Jersey growing up. But one of the great parts about all those rivalries to me is that they had actual significant implications for Big Ten title games, for playoff spots kind of later down the road, right? And I think now with this game having, it's not just an Independence versus a Pac-12 team. This is two schools that now share a conference that has direct implications for who gets in to the college football playoff. And with BYU now 8-0, and I don't know if it's premature to talk about those things, but I do think, that's an element to this, especially with the way the schedule shapes up for BYU with the last 4 games is, there are playoff, which I do think adds to it and is not something that really has been had in this rivalry, to be honest, before, just because of where the rivalry was placed, especially in the last 10 years, where, this rivalry was taking place in September. And so, and BYU is an independent. So I think that adds to it as well.
All right, let's talk a little BYU, as you reference 8-0. I wonder, is there one element that has stood out as the most surprising? There are several surprising elements juxtaposed to all of our expectations, hence the media poll, hence the Vegas over-under, but they're complete. They're playing complementary football. They're good in all 3 phases. And certainly fortune, right? Fortune favors the bold, though. They're creating their own luck. I don't think they have any more questions to answer about whether or not they're legit. But is there one or maybe 1 or 2 elements about this start that's kind of caught you off guard based on what you're expecting?
Yeah, no, I actually wrote this, I think, after UCS game. I don't think there's any people out there now that are saying, because I think for the first couple months of this season it was, is BYU good? Or is this start sustainable, right? Because I definitely think there were some questions. Kansas State, 28-point run in basically 6 minutes. Like, how often are you going to get that? And Oklahoma State, we obviously saw what happened there with a 75-yard drive and the last minute of the game, down to 10 seconds left. And that's an iconic moment, and you definitely don't scoff at it. But again, it's like, I don't think the questions anymore are whether this team is good or not. Because of what you just said, I do think this is a very complete football team. But I do think the questions are, how realistic is a postseason bid for this team now at 8-0? And what does the last 4 games of the season, of the regular season, look like for BYU? And in terms of surprises, one, I think Jake Retzlaff, I don't necessarily know if it's a surprise, but I remember after Wyoming, I remember after SMU, the question was, can Jake Retzlaff kind of find this mix of being the risk taker that he is, which I think makes him a very good quarterback for BYU, pushes the ball downfield, gives this offense something on the ground as well, which is something they did not have last year with Keaton Slovis, but also being able to, also almost calibrate himself a little bit and not take so many risks with the ball. I mean, we saw at SMU, there was a number of turnovers. We talked about after Wyoming, there was a number of balls that maybe could have been turnovers, and there were some interceptions there. But since Big 12 play started, I mean, he's 11-4 in touchdown interception ratio. That's not even counting the rushing kind of numbers that he's had, which is what this offense, I think, is meant to look like. And for the first time since really Tyler Algier, I think L.J. Martin gives BYU this really complete running game that has transformed this offense. And in terms of Jay Hill's side of the ball, I think this linebacker group has been really fantastic, to be honest, with Isaiah Glasker emerging as kind of exactly what he wanted. I mean, 2 years ago, I remember talking to linebackers coach Justin Anna about what do you kind of want to see in a linebacker? What's the mold look like? And he talked about, it's guys like Isaiah Glasker. They definitely need to put on more weight, but the length and the speed at the linebacker position, the ability to drop back in coverage, but also get after the quarterback. And it translates to, 11 interceptions or 11 different guys getting an interception on this team. So I don't know if it's necessarily surprises, because I think we knew where the pieces of the puzzle needed to fit for BYU if they were going to be good, but it was just a matter of, will it actually come to fruition? And the surprise there, I guess, is that it absolutely has the first 2.5 months of the year.
So, look, they're number 2 in total offense. They're number 3 in total defense. And I could keep going throughout the overall metrics, rushing, passing, same thing on defense, efficiency. Like, most of the data indicates they're really complete. Like, is there an Achilles heel? Because I keep hearing Kalani saying, hey, we can be better than we've been. And I'm like, dude, what does that look like? Like, if you could actually play better, like, is there something specific that they need to clean up? Because the metrics tell you that they are pretty solid all the way around this year.
I think they have played well all the way around this year, but I do think there are some times, I think, on defense, and Kalani Sitake has talked about this at times, particularly over the last 3 weeks, right, where there are some big runs that are allowed. I mean, you look at the Oklahoma State game, like, I know this is not what the headliner is because of the way that game ended, and the offense has been good. The offense has been very, very efficient since the running backs came back, right? But Oklahoma State did run the ball quite well on this team. I mean, this was an Oklahoma State offense where Ollie Gordon really hadn't gotten going all year, but he has over 100 yards against BYU, and he has 3 total touchdowns, including the receiving one. All right, so I think there were some concerns in that game, and also you weren't really able to get off the field on 3rd and 4th down on that 17-play drive, that 8-minute drive before. And I think those are the things that Kalani's looking at and just saying, that is where BYU needs to do better. And I think BYU did a better job, I think, in terms of run defense against UCF. RJ Harvey was the best running back in the Big 12 going into that game. He did have a couple big runs, but it wasn't insane. It certainly wasn't Ollie Gordon levels from the week before. So I do think they cleaned some stuff up, but I do think that's kind of what he's talking about when he says he wants some of these mistakes to be cleaned up. But overall, I do think it's hard to poke holes in what BYU is doing right now. And I think he even said that after last week. He said, yeah, there were some mistakes, but going on the road 2 time zones away and beating UCF and kind of containing RJ Harvey to a degree, I think you chalk that up as a win. But when you look at where this team can maybe improve, I think those are the things he's talking about.
So they have 14 picks. That's best in the Big 12. They're 6th in fumbles recovered. They're turning the other team over and pressuring the quarterback in a way that they didn't last year, like, at all, which caught me off guard because of Kalani and because of Jay, 2 defensive-minded coaches that typically couldn't put together a defense that looks like the one that we see this year. What are the biggest differences defensively with this BYU team from this year compared to last year?
I think there were a lot of questions in the beginning of the year for this exact reason, because they decided they're going to bring back the entire defensive line. They didn't really make any. They didn't make any splashy signings in the transfer portal in terms to add to the edge rusher position or even the interior defensive line. And Kalani kind of bet and said, hey, another year in the system, with a year two in a Jay Hill coaching staff. There was no changes on the defensive coaching staff at all. Really, they did bring in Gary Anderson to be a consultant, which everybody knows him quite well in this state. But I do think that bet really paid off for Kalani, where the interior defensive line, I think Blake Mengelson has played extremely well. I thought he had his best game of the year, possibly, you could argue SMU, but probably the best game of the year against UCF. So that certainly helps. But I think the biggest factor you look at in terms of how they gotten pressure on the quarterback, I think you've got to give a lot of credit to the linebackers. Jack Kelly being added from Weber State, playing that linebacker position. He's been very good at pressuring the quarterback, which he did have 10 sacks last year playing at Weber State. It was just like, will this translate? And I think Jay Hills has a strong track record of recruiting guys from Weber that he coached before he got to BYU and then making an immediate impact, like Eddie Heckard, Mark Collins this year as well. And then Isaiah Glasker's emergence, along with Harrison Taggart. I mean, I think for a large part of this year, we thought Jack Kelly or Jacob Robinson would be the best players on defense for BYU. And I think they've been good. I don't say this as they haven't been good, but I think Isaiah Glasker, of the guys who have played 200 snaps on this team, Isaiah Glasker is the highest graded defensive guy on Pro Football Focus. And so his emergence has been really good. And, he could get after the passer too. And I think that really helps. He also has 2 interceptions himself. So those things combined, I think, do help Jay Hill kind of get the scheme that he wanted.
I want to go back to Jake because he was picked as, I believe, the worst quarterback in the Big 12 by some of the media preseason prognosticators. Like, you can draw a direct line. I mean, look, at Sports Talk Radio, we've got to fill 4 hours of time. So I can't just turn on a mic and be like, oh, Cam's hurt and Jake's healthy. Okay, talk to you tomorrow. But you can be that reductive. You really can. Like, Jake has been healthy. He's been awesome. Cam Rising has not been healthy, and the quarterback situation at Utah is atrocious. But by most metrics, Jake is one of, if not the best quarterback in the entire conference. Now, 0-4 a year ago, just atrocious decision-making. And so you understand the skepticism as far as people wondering what that was going to look like this year. When you talk to him down there, like, was it a bunch of work in the offseason? Is just a year older? Is it a better O-line? Like, what are the dynamics that have allowed Jake to go from a player that was thought to be among the worst at his position in the conference to clearly one of the best?
I think there was always an internal belief in Jake. Like, I really do think BYU believed in Jake Retzlaff. Like, even if they brought in other quarterbacks and there was a competition really for all of fall camp, right? Like, let's not forget that. Like, this went really close down to the wire in terms of making a decision to say who's going to be the starter. But with that said, I think Jake has I think he's clearly improved decision-making wise. I think he throws the ball away when there's stuff not there, and I don't think he was doing that last year. So I think that's part of it. But the other part of it too that I think is really significant over the last few weeks is that they are winning games where Jake Retzlaff throws for 218 yards, throws for 230 yards. And Jake Retzlaff can throw for 300 yards. We've seen BYU win. He throws for 293. BYU's asked him to throw quite a bit at SMU, throw quite a bit at Wyoming. That's all true. But with this running game, he doesn't really need to do that as much. And he can kind of pick his spots to when and when he wants to push the ball downfield. And I think last game's kind of a great example of that, where last year, was it really possible for BYU to win a game in the second half where Jake Retzlaff only throws for 28 yards? No, I would say absolutely not. But this time around, when you have L.J. Martin, when you have Hinckley Ropati, when you have Sione Aimoa we've seen in spots, when you have an actual rushing attack that's not just Jake Retzlaff and, everybody else, I think that really helps, and you don't put so much pressure on him to make plays all the time. And that's not something I think that would have been possible last year just because they couldn't run the ball. They really couldn't run the ball really at all and help Keaton Slovis in the least. And I know Keaton Slovis couldn't run either as much. He wasn't as mobile. But I do think that plays a role into this and how balanced this offense is, which is what the offense I think is supposed to look like, right, where you're throwing off of the run. And it's not just you're dropping the back to pass 50 times a game.
All right, Kev, before I set you loose, there's no way of knowing this, but according to ESPN FPI, BYU should be the betting favorites in every game remaining. Do you think they really do it? Do you think we see them win all 12 in the regular season?
Putting me in a tough spot. I think I wrote after UCF, like UCF was the game that they were not favored in the last 5, and they win that game. It's really hard to say that, you never know what's going to happen with Utah. But after that, the schedule does set up nicely. And then the other part of it, too, I think that is a factor in this, is that Kansas State, Iowa State, and even Colorado, like their schedule down the stretch, like there will be losses and there will be separation just because those teams are playing each other. Like I don't have the schedule in front of me, but the mix and matches, they're playing each other. BYU is not. So, and history does show in the Big 12 title race, at least, that teams in the last 4 years, teams in the Big 12 title game, there's been multiple 2-loss teams. There's been a 2-loss team every single year for the last 4 years in the big title race, and who gets to Arlington. So you do set yourself up nicely in the last month of this season to give yourself a little bit of breathing room by beating UCF and going in 8-0. But I don't know. It's tough to predict what's going to happen, especially with this Utah game. I've never been a bystander in it. I've never experienced it, but it's tough to predict, right?
It sure is. It sure is, Kev. I appreciate the time, man. Have a good week, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, thanks, man.
All right, Kevin Reynolds covers college football, BYU, for the Salt Lake Tribune. His Twitter is @KevinReynolds30. Looking for good college football content. Really good kid. Came here a couple years ago, doing a really good job on the beat. So, of course, that game next week will be a big part of our coverage. Excited for rivalry week. Say it slowly. It's going to get weird with some radio hosts next week, including this one probably a couple times. But it's not nothing, as we've talked about during the show. If you're a Utah football player right now and you're kind of wondering, like, well, is there a lot left to play for? You go have a couple of magical moments in a Utah-BYU game, and you're remembered for a long time, even if you're playing for a team that is in a spot that nobody thought you'd be in. So we'll cover that game quite a bit coming up next week. But let's bring in Ryan from the Dish Pros. It's 801-424-DISH. New customer credits. You can get a better TV watching situation while saving money by taking advantage of those. Wireless options, internet options. Ryan, on a Tuesday, what do you want the people to know?
It's just super easy to save yourself a tremendous amount of money. Lots of customers taking advantage of all the different options we had. And, we love it when customers take a look at every tool we have. And that goes from obviously the TV side, fantastic offers right now where you get huge new customer credits. The big thing is you get a price guarantee. Movie channels will throw in the NFL Red Zone free and also the multi-sports pack free for a year. Plus, guys, take a look at your bills. We don't see this very often, but across the board, pretty much everybody's internet bills just seem to jump. And this is the opportunity to lower it, 10 or 15, 20% cheaper than what you're currently paying, and probably even use the same fiber, just pay your bill to a different company. Plus, we've also got fantastic internet, our phone solutions. Guys, this Boost Mobile service we have is phenomenal. Get a brand new iPhone 16. They're building out the best 5G market and most advanced 5G market in the United States. But during this period of time, they're actually piggybacking on the biggest wireless provider in America. And in this market especially, it's the best coverage. So you could probably switch and use the same cell towers, get a new iPhone, and pay $20, $40 a line less than what you're currently paying. And guys, if you're a family like me, a family of 5, that adds up to be a lot of money. We see customers all the time in the $200-$300 range when they utilize all the things that we can save you money on. You just got to pick up the phone. Let us work our magic, get you new products, new phones, new service, and lower your bill. 424-DISH. It's 801-424-DISH.
All right, we got some pro football coming your way coming up next with Sam Brookhouse. Then we're going to move over to Brian Dunseth to get you ready for the RSL match. We'll say goodnight about 6 o'clock on a Tuesday right here on ESPN 700. So you know how I've been bemoaning an outlier of a fantasy football season, right? It's been rough. It's been rough. I'm not going to lie. Also have Stephon Diggs on the roster.
Wow.
All right. So yeah. No, I don't know that I'm going to make the playoffs.
You might be cursed this year.
I am. I think I am, unfortunately. So I don't know that the playoffs are going to be a reality. But let's talk some pro football. It's good to have Sam Brookhouse back on the show on a Tuesday. Sam, happy Tuesday. How are we doing?
Doing good, man. You queued me up with music, the Brookhouse music, like I'm a wrestler, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's my producer. He's in his bag today. Typically, I have to scold him for his country music selections that drive me crazy, but we'll give him a little credit on this Tuesday afternoon. All right, Sam, as we talked about last time you joined, I am a lifelong suffering fan of the New York Football Jets. And the most reductive thing I can say about it is you got in bed with an old weird dude and you're married to a guy that's just done. Like Aaron's got nothing left. The numbers say that. They're giving him everything he wants. And I just think they have hitched their wagon to the wrong guy. Is there any hope for my Jets to turn this thing around?
Yeah, look. The hope is that you have Devontae Adams now. They have the weapons they need. The pieces just have not come together, frankly, in terms of like net points, which projects out a little better than record does at this point. They're not absolutely terrible. They're about, average. They're around the teams like the Falcons and the Bengals who have varying records. But, man, it looks pretty rough. It reminds me of that Brady year, and I'm a lifelong New Orleans Saints fan, the Breeze year too, where he just looks immobile. It looks like he can't throw. And then the defense is struggling on the other side, which was unexpected, some injuries there. It's looking pretty grim. I too, was big on them this year. It's kind of disappointing to see how they performed.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but that's just kind of the deal because I didn't buy any of the hype because when you've been cheering for this team for 46 years, you know the deal. But let me ask you this. Russell Wilson, 2-0 as a starter. And, it was the Giants, all right? So there's that. But Pittsburgh 6-2 with a really good defense and a really good run game. How real do you think this is? Should we be paying a little bit more attention to Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I mean, the defense is the absolute name of the game with the Steelers. They're one of, like, the 4 or 5 best defenses in the league. Cameron Hayward is having a year that returned to form year. TJ Watt makes big plays every single game, made a big play on Monday Night Football. The recipe for the offense has kind of changed since Justin Fields, went out and Russell Wilson comes in. They're really trying to plug back into that old school Seattle Seahawk, play action, throw it deep. And when you have George Pickens, who is probably one of the best contested catch wide receivers in the league, that's ended up being a recipe for success, and we'll see if that can continue. I generally am a little reticent of Russ's potential given what we've seen in the past couple years. But if they can keep making that recipe work, that's a recipe we've seen be successful, particularly in that AFC North. As the year goes on, it gets colder and such.
At what point, I'm going to stick kind of with this theme of, is this real for a moment? And at what point do we start? Look, everyone just might be playing for second against the Chiefs. But at what point do we look at Denver and give Bo Nix and Sean Payton a little credit for, I think they've ran off 5 of 6. Like, what are you liking about it? And do you think it's real and sustainable?
Bo Nix has absolutely shocked me. Mostly his ability to limit bad plays, which is weird. You think about Bo Nix, particularly as an old school SEC fan from Louisiana. Like, I also played against Bo Nix, so we had on our scouting report, he's going to run around. He's going to kind of throw it around. He limited that at Oregon, and now we're really seeing kind of the fruits of it. He can still run around a little bit. He's quite mobile. He avoids sacks. He's done an okay job of avoiding interceptions. He may not be doing the most through the air. He looked good this week. But when you have that really aggressive defense on the other side, coached by Vance Joseph, they're doing a fantastic job of blitzing heavily, really pressing up on the wide receivers with guys like Pat Surtain and Riley Moss. That's also a recipe for success. I think their defense is probably for real. And I'm kind of becoming a Bo Lever, man. I can't believe I'm saying that after all my draft research. But I kind of see the vision and what Sean Payton's trying to do.
Well, now I've got to follow up. Where'd you play against Bo Nix? How good of a player were you back in the day?
So I played at Tulane University, American Athletic Conference. Currently leading the American Athletic Conference, I might add. We went into Auburn. It's been several years now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. We weren't able to come up with a win. I think it was one of Bo Nix's first home games, actually. But it was a fun place to play, obviously, in that SEC environment.
Oh, that's cool to have that opportunity, have that experience is great. Let me ask you about another rookie quarterback, and I've got a buddy who's a big Washington Commanders fan, and finally, for the first time in a number of years, he's actually excited about his team. And, we're obviously in Salt Lake in the former Pac-12 footprint. Jaden Daniels was out here for a bit, and he was good when he was out here, but I don't know that anybody who saw him play, obviously he transfers, he wins the Heisman, it's a different thing. I'm not sure that anybody projected this. Obviously, the Hail Mary is a snapshot moment that maybe average NFL fans are finally, getting with the deal, but he has been so good. And I'll just continue to ask you, what do you like about it and how sustainable is it?
I think it's very sustainable. I thought he was the best, most prepared, I guess, like NFL-ready quarterback going into the draft this year. I thought Caleb did have a higher ceiling because of his Mahomes-like tendencies, which we kind of saw at the end of that Commanders Bears game. But JD, his calling card is those perimeter deep throws, and he's able to hit them over and over and over again. And I noticed his ability to do that, versus Florida State, his last year at LSU, which ended up being a loss. But I was like, this just looks completely different than what we suspected. His downside was always going to be his pressure to sack ratio and taking big hits. He's been able to kind of mitigate that. Obviously, he has a rib injury that occurred, or it seemed that it occurred on him taking a big hit, running the ball kind of erratically. I'm in for the Jaden Daniels ride. I think he's an absolutely incredible player and the class of this year's draft class.
So I referenced the Chiefs, and it just continues. And Andy Reid played his college ball at BYU. We like to cheer for our local players here. And, they have been able to just remake and mold themselves into whatever the game in front of them needs in order to win. I mean, a guy in my fantasy football league straight up dropped Patrick Mahomes, right? And so it's like he's not putting up the numbers that he used to, but it doesn't matter. Like, all they do is figure out what you're trying to do, and then they're just a little bit better than you are on that day. Do you think that this is going to be a situation where everybody's clearly playing for second? Are they vulnerable anywhere? And what do you make of just another incredible start? They're 7-0.
I think their vulnerability is if they start losing some offensive linemen, but that's really their biggest strength right now. Like, they're one of the best running teams in terms of expected points added, which basically puts yards in context and keeps football analysts from, looking at some of this garbage time stuff that can get inflated. And ironically as well, like, we're looking at Patrick Mahomes right now saying, oh, he has an off year, he has tons of turnovers. But even then, they're also good in that statistic per drop back to pass. So, they're really optimizing for what is successful. I think you really hit the nail on the head there on the offensive side of the ball. But where they are absolutely killing teams is on the defensive side of the ball. Chris Jones is mauling offensive lines. Their DBs are just sticking to wide receivers. It's going to be really hard to beat them because they're probably the most well-rounded team in the league right now.
So my producer is a lifelong Dallas Cowboys fan. And, not great. We have Jerry Jones threatening to fire radio hosts. We have players going at media members. They're always good for some drama, but they're certainly not good for consistent high-quality football. Look, they're in bed with Dak, aren't they? Do you think they try to move on from this and maybe just rebuild and go all in on being bad for a while? Or are they just going to be perpetually in mediocrity, which is what they've been forever?
Yeah, I think the Cowboys, at least when it comes to Dak and CD, it's going to be very difficult to move off of them because it's going to be really hard to find someone who's better. I guess the Vikings have kind of done that this year. They moved off of Kirk Cousins. They now come in with Sam Darnold, but we're even seeing Sam Darnold start to regress in the last few games. So it's just really hard to move off of a quarterback who we saw last year over the course of 16, 17 games. He was the best guy in the league. And so when you have a team like that, you want to see where you can plug. We're coming up on the trade deadline. And at Sumer Sports, on the Sumer Sports show with Thomas Dimitroff and Lindsey Rhodes, some great professionals who have been in the industry for a long, long time, we were talking about some of the guys that we like for Dallas. And I'm really interested to see if they try to make a move for someone like a Buda Baker. Because right now, you mentioned like guys going after media members. That was just because the defense is looking so rough. You look at some of the advanced analytics that we have at Sumer Sports, they just don't have a bunch of good players right now. And so I'd really be interested if they go after a Buda Baker or one of these guys who can have a impact in the running game and the passing game and can kind of be a rental for a year to just try to get them into the playoffs at this point.
Got a lot of Niner fans around here. To start the year, they were the second favorite to win the Super Bowl to the Chiefs. And at this moment, it looks like they're now behind the Lions, the Ravens, and the Bills, and they're just ahead of the Eagles. So, look, if they can get healthy, obviously that's still a roster that a lot of GMs would love to have at their disposal. For me, it's always been a Purdy thing. Like, I know it's reductive, but is he good enough to be the guy under center with all the riches around him to win something special? Concerned about the Niners after 4-4? Just they need to get healthy and they're going to be fine. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest concern is the injuries. And frankly, that was the reason why I was a lot lower than consensus at the beginning of the year on the 49ers, because they just have so many guys who are getting up there in age and also who have injury histories. Christian McCaffrey being the number one guy. He's missed the whole season at this point. I know they say they plan that he plans to come back after the bye, but apparently he has an Achilles injury that he had to go to Germany to get fixed. Like, doesn't seem like a recipe for success. I actually think Purdy has played pretty well this season. I know he's had some off games, particularly against the Chiefs, but I've actually been quite, surprised by his ability to generate offense despite turnstiles who have been out of the lineup. I wouldn't worry too much about them. I know it's a little sticky, but their division is very up and down right now. We have teams losing games that they don't expect to lose, teams winning games they don't expect to win. I think they can probably control that division throughout the rest of the season.
So Puka Nacua played his college ball around here as well. And, I'm a Sean McVay guy. And, obviously they've had injury issues over the past couple of years. I was pretty impressed, though, because the Vikes are good. And, the Rams, to me, with Puka back, and we'll see what they do with Cooper Kupp, to me, are a team that still could potentially make teams uncomfortable as we move forward. They still are 3-4, and that's at the bottom of the NFC West. All three of the teams in front of them are only 4-4, though. What's your opinion on the recent uptick that we've seen from the Los Angeles Rams?
Man, you mentioned Puka. He's just kind of an old school wide receiver. He's really just a ball player. I mean, you see on some big downs, they'll motion him in and he'll crack, like completely annihilate a linebacker. He's a big dude. He's great at running routes. I am worried about their injuries because we saw Matthew Stafford not be too productive when both Kupp and Puka were out. But I think they're definitely in that class with the 49ers more than the Seahawks and the Cardinals in that division right now. I'm a little worried about their defense, particularly on the back end. This is another team that I think at the deadline could use some safety, some cornerback help. But I'm really excited about how the way that Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, their two early round draft picks, both from Florida State, have played. They've really been pretty elite in some of our pass rushing and run defense metrics as they try to put a patchwork together to replace an unreplaceable player in Aaron Donald. They've really kind of done a good job there, and it'll be interesting to see how they grow throughout the year as they get more games in the NFL.
Of the rookie quarterbacks, and I think I might know the answer to this, but if we play the tape forward 10 years and we're talking about this class, who's going to be the one guy we talk about standing out among the rest and why?
Man, it's tough, and you think about this. I am sticking with Jaden Daniels just because I think his ability to throw down the field, that's always going to be there unless he gets majorly injured, which is the fear with him. I think Caleb's starting to look good as well. I'd probably put Caleb in at number 2. I'm still sticking with J.J. McCarthy at 3. I liked how he looked in college. He's just a winner, man. He's won all the way from Illinois high school to IMG to Michigan. I think he'll probably continue that with a pretty good coaching staff with the Vikings Next, Drake May is kind of the old school style stereotypical quarterback. I think he can be pretty good. I still don't believe a ton in Bo Nix as, being a long-term 3-4 contract guy with the Broncos, but I just listed off a bunch of good quarterbacks, and the last time we kind of saw that was with the Burrow, Tua class, Herbert, and I think this class is more like that one, than the Trevor Lawrence type classes, the Bryce Youngs, which we saw last year.
Speaking of Burrow, I mean, they're 0-4 at home. So like I've always felt like he is too special for a team to kind of waste. And look, he's still young; he's got plenty of time left. But can Cincinnati turn this around and make it interesting? And why can't they win a home game?
I think they can make it interesting, but moreover, as we go into the trade deadline, typically they're not super active. But I've been listening along, and we're talking about how the Jazz were approaching this season. Typically, NFL teams go all in, but they really have decisions to make on what they want to do, especially given that they did not pay T. Higgins this year, and it seems like he's out the door at the end of the season. They also didn't make a decision to extend Jamar Chase, and they got to do that as long as, they extended Joe Burrow already. So you got to give him his number one target. You look at kind of how they performed this year. Their net points is around that kind of jet zone, that Falcon zone, in between, kind of like median level. They could go up, they could go down. Their offense is good, and Burrow is like a sneaky MVP candidate. If they can string together a bunch of wins at the end of the year, they're fourth in passing this year, passing EPA. Their defense is just atrocious, particularly against the run, which is a little weird because a bunch of their guys are playing good. You see Trey Hendrickson, he has 7-8 sacks this year. They have a bunch of holes kind of in their defensive backfield in the run game. But I think they're going to put it together. I'm optimistic about the Bengals. I think if they would want to make a move, they probably should, particularly to shore up that defensive run game. But I think their offense is very good, and I think that's going to carry them the rest of the year.
I want to go back because you referenced J.J. McCarthy, and, I'm not a scout the way you are, but I loved Sam Darnold in the pre-draft process. The lesson is if you play quarterback, do not go to the New York Jets. Just don't do it, okay? Just do not do it. It will not work out well for you. But, obviously J.J. is the plan for them moving forward, but what sort of questions has Sam Darnold answered, and do you think maybe he's – because, look, there are so many teams right now that are badly in need of a high-caliber starter. So if the Vikings say we're going with the kid, do you think Sam's earned a deal around the league with what he's done?
I'm kind of on the downside on this one, Spence. I do not think that he is a certified starter in this league, despite what he's shown this year. And here's what I chalk it up to. You look at some of his metrics, and obviously they're winning games. They're pretty good offensively. But you really dig deeper into his metrics. The way he's getting a lot of his value is through really deep throws down the field, which, is a skill, but high variance, and through penalties. And this was kind of the recipe for success back in the old days with the Baltimore Ravens and Joe Flacco. But as time went on, they ended up wanting to replace him. And I don't even think he's as good as doing that as Flacco was back in those days. I still think they're probably going to move on and go with J.J. McCarthy next year. And I'd actually suspect that there will be regression as the games move on. We've seen them struggle when they are trailing, both against the Lions and against the Rams. I think we're going to continue seeing that, particularly if on the other side of the ball they don't shore up their defense. I think they may start bleeding points just due to the talent they have back there, and it'll put Sam Darnold in some tough positions, and we may see a regression back to that old kind of poor decision-making Sam Darnold we've seen in past days.
Last thing, and I'll set you loose, Sam. How many teams today are you willing to say you think can legitimately win a Super Bowl?
Look, I love the Lions, and I love the Chiefs. I think they are a class above everyone. I think the Ravens are probably right there too. And after that, it starts getting a little tricky. So right now, I think 3, maybe you include the Bills in there because they have Josh Allen, but probably only 3 I'd be willing to throw money on, Spence.
Wow. All right, buddy, where can people go find your work?
You can find me where all podcasts are. Sumer Daily Podcast. We're going to be doing a lot of trade deadline stuff. In fact, we did one on the Sumer Sports Show podcast, another one of ours. Also, check us out at sumersports.com. We have a bunch of cool data going up that can help you set your fantasy lineups, bet, stuff like that. So that's where you can find me, and at Brookhouse Sports on Twitter as well.
Sam, thanks for the time, man. Keep up the great work. We'll get you back soon, okay?
Appreciate it. Thank y'all.
All right, Sam Brookhouse, bright young kid, man, does a lot of great work up on his Twitter page, his podcast, his website, so check it out. As the NFL, per usual, has been a lot of fun this year. You're week 9. Goodness gracious, man. You blink and this thing's almost done. Week 9 gets rolling on Thursday with the Texans and the pathetic, horrible, embarrassing Jets at MetLife Stadium. The Jets are a 2-point favorite. They won't win. But you can hear that game on our radio station. Hopefully you can watch it. Let's bring in Ryan from the Dish Pros. I've had every game I've wanted this year. Saved a grip of money, got brand new equipment, internet options, wireless options too. What's going on, Ryan?
That's the trick, is take a look at, all of your bills, especially in this world of prices just keep going up. And it surprises me more and more of how much money we can save people, especially if we can help them with their mobile phone service and their internet plus their TV. And it's easy. Call us up. We've got some fantastic services. The Boost mobile offer, it's super impressive. Get a brand new iPhone 16 literally for free and spend $30 a month or $40 a month less than what you're currently paying. It's a simple thing to do. And, they're building this fantastic 5G market out. But during the meantime, they're actually piggybacking on the biggest wireless providers' towers in the nation, which in Salt Lake is the best coverage area. So you could actually use the same cell towers, get a new iPhone 16 or a new Samsung for free, and spend $30 a month less per line. And this adds up quick, especially when you got we can help you with the internet. Fantastic offers there with $200 gift cards plus Dish with their 2-year price guarantee, movie channels, NFL Red Zone. Plus you get the biggest, fastest DVR out there that gives you access to your content everywhere. Call us up, take the upgrade, lower your bill, get all your games, save some money on your wireless devices and your internet. Just pick up the phone and ask us. Say, what can you do for me? How can you help me? It's that easy. 424-DISH. It's 801-424-DISH.
Okay, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Big match tonight at America First Field. RSL's taking on Minnesota. We're going to give you a little preview of that coming up with Brian Dunseth. Then we're back to college football before we say goodnight at 6 right here on ESPN 700. All right, 5 o'clock hour of the drive starts right now. We're going to do something a little different. Usually do the drive at 5, but RSL is in action tonight. The MLS Cup playoffs start tonight. Want to get you guys ready for that. Now, here's the deal. I do not know who our guest is because Trey said he would get me Dunny unless Dunny is too busy. And in that instance, Trey booked himself as the backup, which I would very much like to avoid. So, Porter, who's our guest?
It's Brian Dunseth.
Yes. Oh. Yes.
on.
Bullet dodged.
Come on.
Dunny, thank you for saving us. Happy Tuesday, buddy.
Oh, what's going on, guys? How are you? Perfect timing. I just got done with my meeting for Apple ahead of our broadcast tonight of Real Salt Lake against Minnesota. So perfect timing. Literally wrapped up like 30 seconds ago.
Very nice. Well, look, fall for a lot of people is about football. Fall also means playoff soccer. I love fall soccer. I just love the drama. I love the feel. So just paint a picture for us. You're out there at the stadium. What's the buzz like?
Yeah, I mean, gates are about to open here in about 30 minutes. And then you got the march to the match right around 6:15 where RSL supporters will head out from the tailgate and make their way into the stadium. And listen, today's the start, right? It's the last phase of the season. You work so hard from January to get to this stage, right? All the extra doggies, the runs, the weightlifting sessions, those tough conversations about who deserves to play, who doesn't deserve to play based on performance or new signing, the amount of money spent during the summer transfer window, the atmosphere and the investment into this stadium. And this is what it's all about heading into the playoffs. And once you've secured that top 3 spot in the Western Conference, you've secured home field advantage unless you hit one of these 2 Los Angeles teams, whether that be LAFC top of the table in the West or LA Galaxy, who failed at the very last moment down in Houston. And tonight against the Minnesota United team that, Real Salt Lake has had success, but most recently, these last couple of matchups, they've ended in draws, including these 2 teams meeting a couple of weeks ago where Brian Vera ended up spitting at an opponent and getting himself a multi-game ban. So statistically, 2 teams that match up fairly even, but for Real Salt Lake, probably most importantly, keeping the back-to-back shutouts, turning that into something even more, and trying to get Chicho Arango that goal. It's because it's been elusive finding the back of the net. The 17 goals, 12 assists. His last goal on July 6th. Previous to that, 3 goals and the hat-trick performance June 1st. So they got to get their captain back on track, confident, and scoring goals.
So tell me a bit about Minnesota. Now, ultimately, I don't want to be disparaging, but the 2 games that I've watched, certainly the one here, they did park the bus in a way. They kind of did not engage. And look, tactically, that's something that Pablo did in Seattle. Like, I understand if you don't think that you have the ability to kind of engage the other team, or if you just want to get a road result, that is a way to attack the game that might be beneficial. But first of all, I guess I should just ask you, is that kind of the way they play? And then if so, how does RSL handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it's dependent upon, the game itself. A regular season game going on the road, getting a point at Real Salt Lake is something to be proud of, considering the strength of the home record schedule for RSL this season. They've turned it back into the fortress that it once was back in the days of Rio Tinto. But also for Eric Ramsey and Minnesota United, this is a season of 3s. I just did my hit on Apple TV, and I was trying to explain it's a young manager, just 32 years of age. For those that don't know, the Minnesota United manager, Eric Ramsey, spent time at Chelsea Football Club. He spent time at Manchester United, spent time as an assistant coach at Wales with Gareth Bale and company, and now has taken over Minnesota United. And I think it was kind of, I don't want to say it was out of nowhere, but you didn't think at that stage of his career this young man would take that job. So he had to bet in. And it was actually Cam Knowles, who played for Real Salt Lake as a center back in 2005. He was the head coach for the first couple of matches of the season. So adaptation period, team was doing well. Some young players probably over-punching their mark. In the middle of the summer, June and July, things kind of went sideways. 3 wins in just 14 games. But in these last 10 matches, 7 wins. They've conceded just 1 goal in their last 5, and they've been trending upwards. Like Real Salt Lake, they've added some players, guys like Pereira, Bongi, Robin Lod, up top, Kelvin Yaboa. These players have shown they're more than capable of causing havoc against opponents. But like you said, it's a team that's probably going to come, sit back, force Real Salt Lake, or allow Real Salt Lake to play their possession-based type of attacking football, soccer, and see if they can hit in the transition, because they are lethal in counterattack opportunities. And sometimes the name of the game isn't being beautiful with the ball. Sometimes the name of the game is figuring out how to expose your opponents, and that's what they've done well these last 5 matches, 4 wins and just a draw.
All right, so, excuse me, on the RSL front, you referenced the Vera stuff, which is just such a bad look. And I've had everybody, Pablo, Jason, Kurt, we've all talked about it. Then Big Phil Quinton goes down. And so against Vancouver, Pablo's solution was to move Javane Brown to center back, Emeka Anelli to right back. Emeka, I think, played 16 games at right back last year, and bring in Nelson to where Emeka was. Are you or maybe you straight up no? Like, what is that going to look like? I was going to say you might have the lineups. Like, what is it going to look like tonight with that lack of center back depth?
Yeah, without confirming anything whatsoever, because I want to keep my job.
Look at you.
I think the one thing that you can lean into is everything you just described, how they ended. They kept the shot. They've showed defensively that they can handle those type of moments. And you go back. There's been multiple times this season where Justin Glad and Brian Vera, the preferred partnership for Pablo Mastroeni, has not been available, where effectively you played 2 outside backs as center backs, and whether that was the days of a left back and a right back playing a center back, or you're just having to mix and match, it hasn't been ideal. But at the same time, nobody's healthy. Nobody's 100% healthy. So again, the back-to-back shutouts for Zach McMath, kind of continuing to build what it looks like in terms of defensive solidity, and a shape and identity that, at least with Emeka Anelli, what I would say is if he does again play in that right back position, yes, he's played there. When I talked to Pablo last year, he was thinking down the road of Emeka being a central midfielder, which has been incredible alongside Ojeda. But now if you put him at right back, he's got the intelligence of playing that position, the familiarity of playing that position. But I'd be really intrigued, Spence, to see what type of wrinkle he adds in terms of overloading and stepping up into that midfield in possession, and what that looks like. Because it's gonna cause some havoc for the opponents to kind of think about where his starting position and his ending position are, especially with Catranis down that left-hand side. He loves to get forward, effectively play as a left winger, and that ultimately allows Diego Luna and Matt Crooks to be 2 central midfielders in attacking mode underneath Chicho Arango. All of those little movements that I'm talking about causes a lot of it causes a ton of havoc for opponents to try to figure out when to step, when to stay, and you have to be very communicative in terms of dealing with what's in front of you and what's behind you. That is a nightmare, especially in the playoffs, to deal with.
So Pablo hopped on before the Vancouver match, and I asked him, because the schedule has been a little funky this year with 3 games in 1 week often, and then international duty, injuries, he's had to shuffle a bit. I said, okay, last regular season match before the postseason, are we going to see a first choice 11? And he basically said yes. So I just want you to walk me through this, because it feels like Diogo should be centralized, but Matt's been really good there. And so Diogo was out left. Diego was out right, which is new. Diego hopped on the show last week and said, wherever he plays me, I'm going to end up centralized. So there's that. It feels like Mark Zook was the guy they wanted, and maybe still will be the guy they wanted as fill-in for Andres, and we have Lachlan in the mix as well. He has a lot of different offensive options and groupings. Where do you think that group ultimately should and will kind of settle in when the dust settles?
Yeah, I don't think Marchuk started because he was away with Poland and Germany coming off international duty. So I think Marchuk, if he had his full complement of attacking players available, Marchuk will be on the right, Luna will be on the left, Crooks would be underneath Chicho. Now, it seems surprising for a lot of people, including myself, because Diogo and the amount of money that you've spent on him, it would suggest that he would be the guy that you would absolutely play over Matt Crooks, especially because statistically Matt Crooks isn't anywhere near the respective number 10s in Major League Soccer. But what he does for the system and the pass before the pass and the runs off the ball, I think have been incredibly important for the setup and the tactical nuance that Pablo wants from this group. And by the way, not that he wants to, but Diogo's been really good coming off the bench and being an impact player, in the second phase of play. So all of those things I think can be real and can be true and still be frustrating. But I think Pablo has a really good identity of who his starting 11 is, even though he's got to have some tough conversations about why certain players aren't getting the certain amount of minutes that they expect at this stage of the season.
Tell me what you've seen this year from Diego, who I perceive to be the player in that group that is in the best form right now. Obviously, goals help, and he's scoring goals. The best strike he had against Vancouver may have been the one that actually didn't go in. It went off the crossbar after like 4 step-overs. I mean, he's a magical talent, man. How, from your vantage point, Dunny, has he grown this year?
Well, I mean, I did his game in January when he was called up to the full men's national team, and he was capped and down in San Antonio. And, you know, the joke was he was turning from moon boy to moon man because he was no longer kind of this precocious young talent. Now he was going to be about what can you do at the highest level with the pressure on, the expectation on, and a U-22 contract that significantly gave him a pay raise. Little by, well, I don't want to say little by little because he's the same player, but every game he's continued to, I think, showcase not only why he deserves to start, but why he should be an all-star, why he should be a contender for the U.S. men's national team underneath new head coach Mauricio Pochettino. You know, the double birds based on performance he gave the former U.S. under-23 coach that refused to take him to the Olympics over in France. You know, this is a young man who has dealt with setbacks his entire life, and the strength and mental fortitude that he has is extraordinary. And I would agree with you in terms of the consistency of run of form. There haven't been a lot of games where you've seen a dip in his performance. He's the type of player that nobody wants to play against. He's quick, he's dynamic, he's got a low center of gravity, very, very intelligent, great technically with either foot, and he's a kid that wants to be on the ball as much as possible. And you can see the frustration when he doesn't feel like he can be a part of the solution and finds himself maybe as part of the problem. So, yeah, the sky's the limit for this young man. And 20 goal contributions on the season so far and counting heading into the playoffs. I think it's just the start of what we're going to continue to see during whatever the timeline looks like of him wearing an RSL jersey.
Let me go back to Chicho for a moment because I haven't been able to catch up with you for the past few weeks, and I'm just floored that he's still on 17 goals. I mean, I'm baffled, right? So several dynamics here. Andres and he obviously had a good thing going. Gomez is gone, acclimate to new players. The suspension, maybe a hot start that wasn't sustainable. But how would you characterize exactly why a player that was so red hot has gone so ice cold?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely coincides with the suspension for me. You know, he was supposed to, he was up for the, not only just starting in the All-Star game, but potentially being the captain of the All-Star game in Columbus. So, you know, that and probably the frustration and or embarrassment of having to deal with a suspension in the manner in which it was verbalized or not verbalized. Losing Andres hurts because I think those two just instinctually understood one another. But I would say more importantly, you know, we saw even the Siachenko own goal down in Houston where we thought, okay, Chicho's got his goal again. Here we go. How many posts he's hit, how many world-class saves goalies have had against him. But I think the one thing to recognize as well, statistically, yeah, that's what we're always going to focus on, goals and assists from Chicho because he is that good and he's the captain of Real Salt Lake, and he was about to break Alvaro Sabarria's single-season goal-scoring record of 17 goals. He's still playing well, Spence. I think that's the craziest part about this. You know, statistically, he fell off a cliff, but he's still playing really well. So if I knew the solution, I would certainly verbalize that to Pablo and his staff and to Chicho himself. But I think I'm as dumbfounded to the frustration that he's finding himself in as anyone else.
All right, so what I have here is about 40 degrees at kickoff with the chance of light rain, but maybe no rain at all. You're a guy that played all over the world in extreme conditions everywhere. What
do Sweden?
I know. Like, yeah. So what sort of unique challenges does a cold, rainy night bring?
Well, it's ideal in terms of you feel like you can run forever, but you have to get your body right in warm-ups and make sure that you're not pulling up. By the way, I didn't know Stevie Ray Vaughan was practicing the national anthem behind me.
Nice.
Yeah, I think you just got to make sure physically you're prepared and you're warm. Because getting through the warm up is one thing, but then you go back inside to the locker room, and then you're standing out there during national anthems, which it sounds like it's going to be a 15-minute national anthem right now with Stevie Ray Vaughan out here. But then it's about mentality, and right now it's about killer mentality. So you wear the long sleeves. If you need to wear the gloves, whatever it is, it's going to be a cold night. And hopefully, maybe they can mimic the performance they had against LAFC in the beginning of the season where the snow was falling, seemed like it was going to be a nightmare, and they absolutely smashed LAFC on the night.
All right, Dunny, last thing, then I know you got to go, so I'll just put it like this very simply. RSL gets all three, gets a win tonight if what?
Ooh, if they set the tone, and I expect them to set the tone, but I think it's important on a night like this where you've had such a significant break since decision day that, effectively, 10, 11 days off, that you haven't lost your rhythm. And if you can set the tone, I think that is the baseline of confidence in terms of like the first tackle, first touch, winning that first header. If you set that level of expectation for your teammates and you show that you're up for it, it's a lead by example. I never needed to hear somebody tell me as a player, let's go, boys, let's go. Like I already knew we had to go. So then how do you get everyone to fall in line with your leadership? It's getting stuck in. It's setting the tone. It's getting into those verbal dialogues with the opponents. These are two teams that don't like each other. That's clear and evident. And you got to continue that through the playoffs because in a couple days' time, when you're on the road in Minnesota on Saturday night, you want to make sure that that they know psychologically, whether they want to verbalize it or not, that they're in for one hell of a painful game to deal with playing RSL.
All right, brother. Well, I appreciate the time. Have a great call, and we'll love to get you back on soon, okay?
Sounds good, my man. Good talking to you.
Ryan Dunseth, he'll be on the call tonight with Max Bretas as RSL welcomes in Minnesota for the first leg of a best-of-3 first-round MLS playoff format. They change the damn thing every year, so I think that's what it is. Do not quote me. Brought to you by our friends at Flanker Kitchen. Get game day ready at Flanker Kitchen and Sporting Club at the Gateway, your ultimate destination for pro and college football watch parties. Follow at Flanker SLC on socials for exclusive game day specials and more. Reservations at flankerslc.com. Some unfortunate breaking news. Coach Witt has announced that Money Parks is out for the year. So the hits keep on coming. He's also saying that Isaac Wilson and Brandon Rose are splitting the QB reps during the bye week and will make a decision prior to the BYU game. Here we go again. All right, more next. Keep it here on ESPN 700. All right, before we get out of here, I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. So if you've never tried any of this stuff and you're confused by the language and lines and money line and over-under and such, this is a much easier way to do it. So you can actually utilize, knowledge you have about a team that you love to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projection. So let's say you're a Jazz fan and you want to watch the Jazz and the Kings tonight. Walker Kessler, more than 2 blocks. Larry Marketing, more than 20 points, things like that. Domo Sabonis, less than 18 rebounds, whatever it is. That's why this is the easier way to do it. And they're also giving you free money. As I always say, you might as well go get the free money and see if you like it. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Is Aaron Judge just a more likable Alex Rodriguez? Breaks my heart to say that.
I think so.
He might be.
At least this postseason. Obviously, the Yankees down big. But as you mentioned, Spence, on a close to anniversary of a pretty big comeback, maybe they can get a spark. At least make things interesting. That's what I want. I'm not going to hold out hope that they come back from 3-0 in a World Series, but force a Game 6 maybe. I'd be on board for that.
Looks like Giancarlo Stanton, who's been by far the best Yankee, is going to be moved down from the cleanup spot to 5th, switching with Jazz Chisholm. So there's a lineup switch. Desperation time. But if Aaron Judge can't get a hit, this team is screwed. So it is the 20-year anniversary of the Boston Red Sox coming back from a 3-0 deficit against my Yankees. So maybe we can exercise some demons tonight.
Maybe that's a bad omen, right?
That don't have to be negative all the time. It could be a good omen.
I'm just throwing it out there. That was the Red Sox that did that, your arch rival. But we'll see. I personally hope they make it interesting. They win and extend the series. That's always my hope, that we see 7 games. That's the best two words in sports. But, right now they're going to need more than a lineup change and more than a couple hits from Aaron Judge. They're going to need 4 straight games of really solid play.
Andy Larson, our buddy from the Trib, is reporting that Cody Williams gets the start tonight in place of Taylor Hendricks. So we wondered if it's going to be development, you might as well, because what are we going to learn that we don't know about John Collins?
Right. Well, you asked Tim McMahon earlier on the show, have you seen enough to think the Jazz tank is intentional? Well, when your players are getting injured, when you're not really playing well, it doesn't have to be intentional. The Jazz are 0-3, and they're now at a point, Spence, where you're having to throw in guys you were not planning to start, and it's Game 4. Now, that sucks if you're a fan who is in the arena, buying your Dippin' Dots, buying your uniform, all in on the team. But from a big picture perspective, when you zoom out, might be a good thing for the Utah Jazz in 2024.
Did you say Dippin' Dots?
Hell yeah, I did.
Kind of a random snack to select. When's the last time you had Dippin' Dots?
It's more. The reason I said Dippin' Dots is because it's very much a game thing. So the last time I had Dippin' Dots was the last time I think I was, probably at a game as a fan. Outside of last night at the hockey game, I did not have any Dippin' Dots, unfortunately.
How was your experience at I believe that was your first Utah Hockey Club game?
Yeah. At least, as a fan, I went and picked up my credential and was there earlier in the year, but, was able to just kind of take in the event, take in the atmosphere, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, the game was interesting. 4-1 was the lead late into that one, and then Utah Hockey Club let San Jose, who has been really bad, in fact, hadn't won a game in several weeks, and Utah let them right back in it, and then, of course, lost in overtime. So the result wasn't good. The team is not playing all that well at the moment, but it was fun. I do wonder, Spence, we're only on week 2 or so, and it was San Jose. They're not a great team. Wasn't all that full. It wasn't, and I know it's early. It's not a good team at San Jose, but I do wonder when we're talking about the environment there, you'd think that this early on, the attention to the hockey club would be still really, really up front. And I don't know, that early excitement, that early wave of people being in the building and packing that thing seems to have died off a little bit. The majority of the upper bowl was kind of empty, which I thought was surprising.
All right, before we get out of here, some tough news as Money Parks is done for the year following an injury he sustained against Houston. Cameron Rising is set to have surgery this week, and it looks like Brandon Rose and Isaac Wilson are going to split the reps this week, and we'll find out more as they evaluate the position. Bummer about Money Parks, man. You got it for that kid.
Yeah, obviously Money, guy who hadn't broken through as much as maybe you would have liked. That's partly because of the quarterback position, right? Money had a lot of really good showings when Cam was healthy. You saw him break out in that game against USC. And I mean, if they're going to have a strong finish to the year, you're going to have performances from guys like Money Parks in that locker room and guys that can help out an Isaac Wilson or a Brandon Rose or whoever it may be in that backfield. But yeah, that's a tough loss. Obviously, you mentioned Cam Rising going in for surgery later this week. TBD on the future for Cam. We're not sure there. And then, when you're having what looks like, at least as of today, Spence, maybe a quarterback battle midway through the season, and it's a battle between a freshman who's already shown not to be entirely ready and a sophomore who, from all reports in the offseason, wasn't ready either. Not ideal spot to be going into a rivalry game if you're Utah.
Let me ask you one more question, then we're going to get out of here. Because if I answer my own question, I might say Jalen Glover. Is there anybody on this roster, in your opinion, that hasn't been getting run, that Kyle could look either side of the ball, that could kind of provide whatever they need? I mean, is there anybody with the depth that we haven't seen that could, Jalen's the one, if I'm answering my own question, but is there anybody out there that can actually provide a spark?
Yeah, well, offensively, obviously, you mentioned Jalen, and that's the right answer, but it's so much more than that because the offense has been so pedestrian. It's Landon King. I haven't heard Munir McClain's name until very shortly in that game against Houston. It's Micah Pittman. I mean, there are really no weapons that are making huge impacts on the offense right now, and that's part of the problem. Defensively, yes, but it's all availability, right? It's Connor O'Toole, it's Samote Pepa, it's Junior Tafuna when he's there, Keanu Tanavasa, who has been in and out of the lineup. Defensively, yes, they need that spark, but it's going to be just based on availability and health. Offensively, man, it's just about the quarterback getting Landon King, Munir McClain, Micah Pittman, Money Parks now obviously out, but those guys are going to be relying on the quarterback to get them involved, and that will be the spark that Utah is hoping for.
World Series next?
Yes,
All
World
right.
Series next on the show.
Stay tuned. World Series action coming up. We'll see if the Yanks can actually get a game. All right, Porter, what comes our way on a Wednesday show?
On a Wednesday edition of the program, the return of Tony Jones.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
It's a big deal.
It's NBA season. Tip-off is here. Obviously, Tony, one of the favorites here in the market when it comes to interviews on our shows. I don't just say that. When you look at the downloads on our interviews, it's Tony Jones. He dominates. So good to have Tony back in the fold. Chris Comrani is going to stop by tomorrow because he is going to be out of pocket over the course of the late weekdays. Amy Donaldson is also going to stop by, so we'll cover all of our bases there. And then we're also going to be visited and joined by some friends from the Olympic Legacy Foundation. So some non-college football, non-soccer, non-NBA market stuff with the folks from the Olympic Legacy Foundation. So pretty busy show, but of course, Amy, Chris, and the return of Tony, top of mind.
Can we get Tony to make some sort of Jared Butler is going to be an all-star proclamation tomorrow?
I'll text Tony and say, just humor us. Give us like something almost incendiary as far as hot takes go. I'll give them the heads up.
All right. I like it. So join us for a Wednesday show. Got a fun Tuesday night of action with Jazz Hoops, World Series, and RSL taking on Minnesota. We'll say goodnight, and a special thank you to Richard Smith, Tim McMahon, Kevin Reynolds, Sam Brookhouse, and Brian Dunseth. If you missed any of that sound, head to the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. It's the ESPN 700 app, and that's available in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Then finally check out what we do every day for 4 hours on our podcast page, and it's called The Drive with Spence Checketts, and that's available wherever you get your shows. Hit that subscribe button, give us a rating, review, say nice things, give us all the stars. It helps. He's Porter. I'm Spence. Saying goodnight. Enjoy your Tuesday evening. We'll talk to you on a Wednesday drive. World Series baseball comes right coming up next, right here on ESPN 700.